Right, this is going to be another episode of Summoning Insight. Obviously, we are coming to you as MSI is underway, or I would say about to begin. But that's just who I am and my character in esports, and I'll always be true to both, won't I? So obviously, we had the play-ins. We're going to get into all that, don't worry. But first, I need to actually tell you a little fantasy, swords and sorcery type story, because I'm Thorin, obviously, and my namesake in the books. I was thinking, actually, of sort of like a quest that he could have undertaken. You know, he approached the Misty Mountain. He entered to gain the treasure. And lo, he saw the mighty dragon before him, the smoke coming from its nose, the flames, the heat coming out, and so stepped forward the mighty dwarven warrior, the oaken shield carrier himself. And what weapon would he use to slay, to neutralize this mighty foe? Well, you might think the Arkenstone, the jewel of his people, the source of their power and the heritage of his line. But no, in this particular case, he pulled out the mighty food-safe glycerin chamber of the freeze pipe, because he understood a special type of technology, a modern technology, more of a steampunk-esque than a wizardry, would be required to battle this foe of an ancient age. I haven't even fucking written this down, boys. I'm just this good. And then he, as the dragon's eyes gleamed like a demon in the dark or a cherry within the bong. By the way, they have bongs, dab rigs, oil rigs, and bobblers at the Freeze Pipes website. As he saw he knew what was coming, the intense heat, the irritation of the burn. But suddenly the freeze pipe captured it, cooling it by over 300 degrees, because all Tolkien stories are mega long. So for an hour while it was in the freezing section over in some other area of Middle-earth, he was just singing songs, wasn't he? Because that's what dwarves do for like 7 pages when you're like, I want to get to the next part of the story. So anyway, getting to the next part of the story, after the smoke was cooled, obviously at that point, it was just like a little pet dragon, wasn't it? And at that point, he was loving it. Then, look, he is Thorin. So then it was all about money. It was all about the dragon sickness, wasn't it? So at that point, he wanted to save money on future freeze pipe. And so, lo, the last free nation, now led by Thorin, that's right, I'm working that in, would also then grant him the magical code. Remember, dwarves are all about, like, you need, like, secret things in the moonlight to open a door. The particular code in this case, LFN, for 10% off your order at thefreezepipe.com. I didn't even write any of that shit down. I'm just that good, motherfucker. I'm just that good. All right?
Very good. Excellent start. You know, I did the low-hanging fruit bong comparison.
That's good.
on Power Spike. Yeah, you know, but that was very riveting.
No, listen, I noticed, mainly thanks to Dom and all the rest, a lot of people have been using the bong pongs. I mean, I had a pretty good one. I said, you know, who wants to see a bong get binned? Because obviously bong played bin. And then my joke was, why are we talking about the LEC talent? But that's enough of that. I like to leave that one just out there so it burns a little bit. What do you mean, though? Exactly. You figure that out, motherfucker. That's also another theme of my career. You figure out what I'm saying. You figure out what I'm saying and what's going on in my mind.
Sometimes you figure out what Thorin is saying has had disastrous results.
No, it has. That hasn't always been the best approach. But the thing is, people love that game, I've noticed. They just really enjoy it, don't they? There's so many things we can talk about here. And what we're going to do is, I've noticed on SI, we sort of do it a bit like we used to on By the Numbers. We used to call the opening segment of By the Numbers petty grievances, because we just address whatever we're all heating about, what we're annoyed about at the beginning. Because obviously we didn't have freeze pipe technology back then, so there wasn't a way to just cool that smoke down and have an enjoyable experience without feeling all hot and irritated. 10% off with the code LFN at thefreezepipe.com. But anyway, there's 2 ads in the fucking row. Take that one for free. So anyway, the point is, there's a bunch of meta discussion I actually thought we could have before we get into like the results, the teams. By the way, as I joked earlier, the best part of the tournament's about to become. This is when, by the way, as I said, the best international tournament in League of Legends since IPL 5 is about to begin, boys. You're about to see the double elim. You're going to see all these regional matchups. So let's get into it, right? There's some meta discussion to have first, right? First things first, let's just do one that's not related to MSI, and then let's get into some of the MSI things and people's angles and homerism and all that. So you pointed this out to me, Monte. I didn't notice because I've been doing this other stuff in CSGO. The LEC All Pro team was announced today, right? A lot of people will no doubt have been putting theirs together. Now, I will say at the outset, this is one of the hardest ones I've ever seen to do, in the sense that in the modern day, and we'll get to this meta context as well, obviously it's not like the old All Pro, which was only for the regular season and included every team. Now you do All Pro after the whole split, which includes the groups, which 2 teams don't play in, and includes playoffs, which 6 teams don't play in. So basically, spoiler, if you've looked at any of these All Pros, if you don't make top 4, you are not going to get in, even if you are prime, faker, caps, or like fucking, I'll say reckless just for your own sake, you morons. But let's just say, you know, it doesn't matter. Like, basically, that's one thing I already have slight issue with, because it already basically means people are just waiting like last split, Monty. And if a dominant team wins, they're just going to put all the players All Pro. And also, if you just are a team that, like Mad Lions, does a miracle run, well, the last 4 series are going to be in everyone's mind. So you're also going to get all these players on there. So unfortunately, I noticed when you actually have a look at the names on this list, some of them are debatable, and actually, I think just the format of doing this is something we can have a bigger discussion on. So in terms of specifics, Monty, the lineup is Chasey for top lane from Mad Lions, Elyoya for jungle from Mad Lions, Niski for mid lane from Mad Lions. You see the pattern yet? Crowley for ADC, because that's right, Kazi. Understand, homie. You could win everything and people at least know who you are. I'm just going to say that, like, at this point in time, like, the joke there is that Crowley lost and he got it over you, bro. Like, that's just, essentially, every other voter's like, well, it has to be Mad Lions, and then they go ADC, crowd shot, of course. Like, I love that already. But anyway, we'll put that. Obviously, it was Crowley, but I think that's, like, the most ironclad one for me. And then Hillasang from Mad Lions at support. So we've got 4 Mad Lions players and Crowley. But enough about the finals. But anyway, you get that one, right? So what are your thoughts on these, Monty? Would these be your picks? Is there any shockers here?
I think what's egregious about it, I mean, the LEC All Pro voting just continues to be egregious for whatever reason. But the thing about Mad Lions is that they only really caught on in the last week of competition, right? In the last phase of the tournament. Because remember, in the spring groups, that's when they were actually 2-0'd by Vitality. And Vitality was the one easily passing through that stage. And the fact that BDS also, you know, was 2-0 within the group stage and then 3-0'd Vitality in the upper bracket of the next phase of the tournament, it's really hard to understand how Mad Lions could have 4 players on this list. Because these other teams, it's not reflecting the entirety of the event.
BDS could have won the final. They could have even won the final, right?
I mean, Mad Lions could have lost.
I mean, they would have lost to Fnatic if Reckless just fucking hit the
and they
Nexus.
Would have lost to Fnatic.
That's actually true. Yeah.
They would have lost. So like they were literally, they had 3 elimination games that they won. Okay. To me, that doesn't scream 4 out of our best 5 players are the best at their positions in the league. I'm just saying, that's not what that means to me.
Like, what Monty's saying flips the other way, doesn't it? It's like, well, then actually, Mad Lions had a pretty bad championship run, Monty. They barely did it. What the hell? They have 4 of the 5 best players. Like, this is why, remember that time they had 4 of the 5 in that infamous summer split last year where they lost all the playoff games. That's why that was silly, because that's what made you look dumb. It's like, how are you losing all the series if you have 4 of the 5 best players? You've done the same thing again. I've got 2 angles on this. Like, first, go on.
What's crazy too is like,
do your players actually tell me who you'd have for each role.
Think about BDS too, because remember we're taking into consideration the entirety of the spring split, right? Which is like in the last 2 phases, so the best of 3 phases of the event. What BDS was 9-3
over the whole split, Monty. BDS, even when they lost, went something like 16-5 in games won and lost. Like they were absolutely dominant.
They were 9-3 in the double elimination portion of the event, and they were 7-2. So yeah, they were 16-5 overall. So you're telling me a 16-5 team? I mean, you could make an argument. I think this is actually kind of legitimate, by the way. You could make an argument that this team was giga carried by Crown Shot.
Sure.
You know, I wouldn't necessarily have anybody else kind of in the first All Pro team besides Crown Shot, but I think that is a credit to how good Crown Shot was. And also, honestly, if anything, BDS should win coaching staff, because in my mind, their coaches were the ones who were enabling a lot of their players' strengths and hiding a lot of their flaws. So those are the 2 things I would give to BDS, right? But the other side of that is I wouldn't give the 4 other roles to Mad Lions.
Yes. Like, to me, I would absolutely, Crowley gets it. Elyoya, I also probably would give it to. I think those are pretty solid.
And Chasey. I
mean, Chasey mainly thanks to the finals as well. Obviously, that one gives it to him. And spoiler, Adam was never getting first place in this one. So those 3, okay. The problem I have is Hillersang, I actually did give to myself on side select with Rich, but I think that's mad debatable. You could still give it to Mickey if you want. Unfortunately, I think with Mickey, you have all those, you have the Jaime game, you have the fucking Jarvan game in your brain. You just have those bad games that you remember where he wasn't. Here's the problem. He was the MVP of last split, so he just wasn't that Mickey X, was he? But as we're saying, it was a pretty scuffed split for everyone who isn't called BDS, basically. So that one I think is debatable. But the one I actually think is egregious is Niski mid. Like, here's what's sad. I actually think Niski last split might have been the best mid laner. Like, dude, he was actually, like, very, very good. He was even an MVP candidate for me. He was playing really well in winter. I thought in this split, actually, he was way more up and down. And even some of the games they won, look, aside from when he would get, like, TF or Gragas, sometimes he just looked very average, or he would just lose games. Sometimes I thought it was the other players pulling his arse out the fire, mate. Even Kazi sometimes was carrying games when Niski wasn't. So for me, I think mid lane's the most wide open it ever was. History tells you can always go with Caps, but he was a bit underwhelming. I actually thought Koi shit the bed, so Larson didn't end up getting a benefit from having beaten G2 in a series. So I personally, with my own bias, went for Larson. I think that's a pretty wide open one, but I'm kind of shocked by the Niski one. Like, again, as you say, because the cumulative 4 or 5 just seems jarring.
I mean, I think the problem, so if you go into the earlier stages of LEC, then you might be able to make an argument if you consider all of spring for Perkz, but Perkz did have some shaky games towards the end. But I think it was hard to pick the mid lane because you had Niski, who was hugely benefiting from the fact that Gragas was this massive flex pick for Mad Lions, so they could take it early, and then he would flex onto it and be able to have these big performances. And then on the other side, you have Larson, who, while his team wasn't doing any very well, was very stable in the mid lane. But who else do you take for this role? Like, Nuke's champion pool was incredibly suspect. Astralis didn't actually end up performing particularly well in playoffs.
If Leader had made playoffs, dude, if he'd have actually even finished fourth, I think he would have been a top 3 here at least, you know. And I also think actually, look, he'll never be first, so first forget it. But like, until they collapsed, Perkz could have been third all team or something. Oh, by the way, the other thing I'll add in as well, when you say that about the voting, look, here's the saddest thing of all. It used to be the LCS All Pro that was the most criminal one, because in the LCS All Pro, the players and coaching staff would legitimately troll each other. And if they didn't like someone, like, not only not put them on the top 3, put like a bomb that they know doesn't really count in their spot so they can never get like second and third place points and be like a top pro. Like, that used to make that whack. The thing I can't handle about LEC is actually a point I'm going to sort of raise later when I talk about player base size, is Europe is not, I'm sorry, Germany and all the people that you produce politically, Europe is not actually sort of like one state. I don't know if you know that. It's not one country, guys. It's actually like a coalition of loads of countries, a lot of whom have actually like resentments against each other or don't like each other, or even better, just like their country. And so one of the things that does ruin LEC voting, they refuse to take these people off the list, Monty. I look up every split. They let people on the list just vote for people from their country who are in the league. There's a Greek guy who does it all the time. I'll say it right now, even though I like some of the people who do it. The French can't fucking help themselves. They can't help themselves. If there were Spanish people, they'd be all over that shit as well. So as a result, that already makes it mad biased. And then also, I'll just throw in, they have a really big problem in Europe understanding who was good recently and who is an all-time great player. So if you are Caps, Reckless, these sorts of names, dude, you're a shoo-in to be top 2, top 3 teams. You're just always going to make it if you have a vaguely... Like, the joke on this one is, I almost expected Caps to be the first team All-Pro mid, even though I actually thought he had a fairly underwhelming split. And actually, if he'd have had better games and hadn't played stupid supportive shit, maybe they would have even won the split. I think he's one of the reasons they didn't win, mate. So, to me, I also think that's a big problem. Historically, people can't stay away from the star names as well. And let's be real, of all the splits ever, Monty, this was not a split to be just voting on past heritage, you know. This was a split with people like Crowley being the best player in the league. Someone who used to be an also run. This was a split where you could have put like lesser names into big positions. Like Shio, I'm glad he made one of the teams. That guy should be a top 3 jungler. He went from being a nobody / an ERL guy to like, actually he was doing a great job. For me, he's like, I mean, I've said it before, I think he did some of the heavy lifting on the Nook thing. That's why their mid jungle wasn't a joke. They actually could compete and even carry games. So LEC sadly is always scoffed in that regard. And then also, I'll just say this, because fair play to the people who don't just do the votes. They sort of do, like, you know, some media members in the NBA and stuff do. They'll say why on like a podcast or Twitter, why they voted that person. Fair play to people like Peter Dunn, who will make their votes public, right? Because when they explain it, look, I like to know their perspective, but the problem is this. If you see how coaches in Europe vote, dude, oh, it kills me inside. They do it, no joke, based on 1, scrims. That's real.
Yeah.
They go off scrims. So if they've seen more shit in scrims than you ever saw in the real games, they'll just think that guy's really good. And then the second one, and this is why I reference Peter Dunn, is they use things that are idiosyncratic only to them. That's the problem with all awards, by the way. Every award, you have to ask yourself at the beginning, what is the award and what are the metrics? They don't do that. Everyone's just allowed to walk in and vote on anything they want. So people like Peter Dunn will do stuff like vote a player who isn't as good higher than one who's better at his role, but based on weird things coaches love, Monte, like, well, he sort of does more than you'd expect, and plus his other player's not that good, so he has to kind of like really work, like, but is he better though? Well, no, but you know, I think that it's like, oh, bloody hell, we're off in the weeds already on this one. So there is that as well. So actually, yeah, I think LEC voting is a bit silly. It's just a bit silly. And then finally, like I said earlier, I just wish there was some way. I don't know how you'd do it, I'm afraid. I actually think, I'll say this. I think they should just vote after groups. That way, if someone really did like Yankos, you might even still make third team there, mate, even though you didn't make the groups. Like, you were so good in those 9 games. I also think people like Lars, it gives you a chance if you don't make Leader. Dude, Leader would have been on here if we did after groups. I think the problem is when you do it after the playoffs, this is what I'm going to explain to people. I love the way MVPs work and all teams work in the NFL and the NBA. They have nailed it because what they understand is this: the best team gets the championship and the trophy, but you don't know who the best player is. Is the best player even on the best team? So what a regular season award allows you to do is if you are Michael Jordan in whatever it was, like 1988 or whatever, you can be on a team, Monte, that's like the 11th best in the NBA, but you're so fucking good, of course you're the MVP. That's allowed. That can happen. You can be, famously, look, my boy fucking Peyton Manning was all NFL first team a million times, then got first round bounced, didn't he? Like, but the point was, he was the best quarterback in those regular seasons. So I just think it goes against the spirit of what an all-pro team is for me. Like, for me, the all-pro team isn't who on the winning team was the best. That's you know, like, we don't need to worry about that. It's a team. They won. I mean, you get the best example. BDS would have been the best argument ever for my case if they'd have won Game 5, Monty. Because in reality, they only had one player who deserves All-Pro. He is the MVP of the league, and they were the best team. I think they were the best team even after Mad Lions beat them, boys. Like, they just were. So I don't know.
I think they had a lot of flaws that were eventually exposed, but I do agree that Crownshot was like clearly the MVP of this.
Yeah, but think of this, Monty. If Reckless hits that fucking Nexus, do they ever get exposed? There'd be no Mad Lions there. There'd be no Mac there. At that point, they're probably just playing Vitality or G2, and they might have won. Who knows? It's not impossible, right? Sure. Right, let's do some fun MSI topics now, aka Thorin thinly veils shit-talking fellow professionals as analysis or some sort of meta-contextual discussion. So, okay, again, like the freeze pipe ads, I'm the best at this, so get ready. So there have been a couple of incidents of, listen, I can't lie. There are people, like, I'll say it straight up, but if you want to block me, just fucking block me. Don't worry about it. I'm not the guy who's ever going to cry and do the screenshot for clout like a goblin because I don't want to work the overtime fucking broadcast of a major. So, Azil, if you want me, just block me because I can't lie. I hate follow you. I actually, by the way, respect you as a professional. I actually think you're pretty good on camera. And I do respect that you were a pro in World of Warcraft. You even sometimes have good in LCS analysis. My problem is when you exit the LCS, you are my number one hate view person because your takes, you are the new Jack for me. Even Jack sort of tapered it off and I thought, quite frankly, took your role when you left and sort of became the elder statesman. You know, I just like all the regions. And he even would go against NA. The problem Azael has is this. And by the way, you can go look on Twitter. I nailed it. I did this tweet before the tournament began, Monty. I said, like, essentially, is anyone ready for the usual NA LOL analyst playbook approach of ironically pretending to hype the NA teams, but with a sense of irony. So when they lose, you can go, haha, I was just joking because I'm from NA. But the second they start winning, all of a sudden, I never doubted them. Wow, we're going now. What's going on, LEC? What's up, bitches? Like that. He already did that in this tournament, but he did it off planes, homie. He did it. He acted like, and by the way, this is so mental on a million angles. He was talking because, look, I get it. It's true. Everyone does always claim whoever the worst NA team is going to fail in planes. That is a famous thing people do. And he's right. Statistically, they've never done it. In fact, they have been dominant in planes. The problem is this. Read the room. First of all, who did Golden Guardians beat to get through? Oh, the team you took fucking Gory and what's his name from?
River.
What? See, you mean when you take another region's best players and pay them to play on your team, you can beat that region, aka the story of LCS, you motherfucker. Remember, in this scenario, I've always said this about LCS. It's okay, Monte, if you want to battle like, hey, we're not bad. Don't ever battle like you're better than another region when you have advantages they don't. Because as I've always said, the LCS is the kid who has the fucking, like, look, you don't have the latest Ferrari. That's the LPL and the LCK. But I tell you what, you have like a 5-year-old Testarossa, Monte. Like your dad gave you his old one. And so it's still way better than like the European guy who's like a rally driver in like a Mercedes or a BMW. He's just a better driver than you. So he beats you every time. And then you just get an old world champion top laner, an old world champion. You get a young prospect who would have been like one of the best at like ADC. It's ridiculous what they do in fucking NA. And you're not one of the, aside from China, you're the ultimate region to benefit from importing. And what's more, what's that again? A couple of years ago, you're allowed fucking oceanic players. And they don't count as imports. Bro, you have every advantage anyone could have except the best domestic players. And what is your result? You're going to talk shit on dominance over a smaller regions. Bro, why would they ever beat you? The real joke is, why aren't you just winning every game against them? Why is it even close? Like, actually, the real embarrassing one to me is this, and I'll just say it. If you count up all the advantages, NA should always have been better than EU. And here's one reason why, and I'm sick of this disingenuous way they frame this, Monte. Marc Z loves to do this. He always says, but the player base in Europe is so much bigger, Thorin. That is so disingenuous when you consider 100% of the player base in NA speaks English first language and could all play on the same team. Now let's go to Europe, right? First of all, there are Russians, I play CSGO, who cannot speak English or barely can. Then you have countries, remember, every country except England is not speaking English first language. Remember, almost all NA, EU, LCS teams, LEC teams, are playing with 5 second language speaking people speaking English. That is ridiculous. And you're going to act like that doesn't have an effect. Bro, they're not fucking Starhorn Royal Club from season 4. Like, you have to actually talk to people. If you're the jungler, you have to be able to say things. If you're fucking top laner, you have to explain the wave. Like, do you not see the insane advantages you have in NA? The joke is the only advantage you don't have, aside from a few more players, is better players. Like, that ain't my fault. Spoiler. If the one thing you don't have is better players, you can't talk shit. You know what I mean? Like, that's the crux of talking shit. So I want to know what your take is on this topic.
It's also that NA has always had more money than Europe, continues to still pay players still does now, right? Money. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's slowly changing, right, over the last year or so, but definitely until the end of last year and also into this year, like before EG cut their roster and we saw all these kind of moves where teams were dumping, you know, potentially highly paid players. But I think this scenario is, you know, it's Europe also gets the up and coming players, right? So they're hiring a lot more rookies, so that drives pay down, or they're hiring Korean players. They're signing Korean players who don't have an established career, as opposed to Pioshik, literal reigning world champion, and God knows how much that ended up costing in the end. So I think that when we look at these, you know, the NA disparity, they have had massive systemic advantages that they have completely bungled. Like, the owners have imported the wrong players a lot of the time. Look who the best performing imports are right now, like Gory and River. These guys are not superstar names. It's not Pioshik, who is like coming as the like I said, the reigning world champion. So when we look at what's going on in North America, it's actually pathetic the way that they perform internationally. Like, you expect this region with all of this investment behind it and all of these imports, including I mean, think about the other systemic advantages that they had. Not only did they take River and Gory from this PSG Talon roster, although obviously River's voyage was more circuitous through Dignitas first, but in the end, these are players that could have been playing on this roster. But Riot took away the LMS and they formed a new league with a much smaller budget.
They could even arguably be an LCK. It's not impossible, right?
Right. Yeah,
they might be one day, I would imagine.
They're better than a lot of the mids and jungles that are within the lower teams in LCK currently. They certainly have the talent. You know, Gory did play in LCK, and he was a hyped up prospect earlier on in his career. So I don't know, man. Like, the whole like running a victory lap over NA's performance, I don't even understand. Like, here's what I don't get about these guys. Okay, and I've said this before. If you want to cast good League of Legends, You've had opportunities throughout your entire career. You could have fucking moved to Korea. You could have done what I did. It's not that there weren't jobs in Seoul. It's not that you wouldn't have had these jobs in the bag if you wanted to take them. You just don't want to leave North America for whatever reason. You want to live the life in North America, and that's fine. But you can't then pretend that you are casting some sort of elite region and start to mega hype it up. Like, you made a choice. You prioritized not casting the best games. And in return, what you've gotten was the lifestyle that you wanted. So it just feels really bad when these guys are doing all this bullshit on social media, because they have intentionally decided to cast a worst region, and then they are seemingly intentionally dishonest about why that region has had.
Yeah, they sort of have a conflict of interest almost there, don't they? To make the region seem better, because it's their region, it's their job.
Look, Americans have gone to LEC to cast LEC. There are a bunch of them there right now. There are Americans like myself who have Wolf, Doa, who have gone over
most of the
to
best, mate,
LS, who have gone and casted
Dom
LCK.
is from NA. All these people don't homer NA.
Yeah, no, but I mean, all of these people went to LCK. We're in Korea casting. You don't want to live in Korea. That's fine, but then you give up the opportunity to really make yourself be known on the international stage and have serious opinions. If those opinions are not, NA is going to get completely bodied in the next round of MSI, which is what we're going to see.
Yes.
Maybe Cloud9. I'm at least cautiously optimistic that Cloud9 could do something maybe against Billy.
They've got the right opponent, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, they have the right opponent, but even so, it seems very unlikely that that's going to happen, given some of the flaws within Cloud9 as a team. So, I mean, it's just you can, if you want to crow about a performance against Brazil, a region in Taiwan, Southeast Asia, that was literally gimped by Riot, who historically, when they were at their peak and had all of the resources, were doing better than North America.
Yep.
We all remember, remember they've actually won a world championship. Type A Assassins won a world championship. Flash Wolves was a very legit team for a long time. And ever since that fell apart, their competition has been
and literally they lost people to LPL as well. They all lost all that talent.
Yeah. And think about NA's competition and who they're beating. They're beating Brazil. They're beating Latin America, right? They did beat, and convincingly so, to their credit, PSG Talon and Taiwan. But none of these are major regions. Anything besides these results would have been considered a massive upset. And all of these regions are existing on a budget that's probably no joke, 10% of NAs.
By the way, two things. One, another thing I forgot to add it as an advantage, because it's something I do forget myself. Both Americans and Europeans always forget this. Have you ever seen that map, Monty, where they show you in the world what the average temperatures are like? People don't know this. They think because of the people look similar, that North America and Europe are the same. Europe is essentially all colder except the Mediterranean. And then, no joke, America is more the whole way, USA is Mediterranean to North Africa. That's the average temperatures. So there's another thing that's a mad advantage. I know players, you don't even need me to tell you the names. Think of the ones who've just been in NA for 7 years. They just want to live in LA. They don't want to bloody live in Berlin. They want to make more money on a team that's more famous, and they want to live with that weather and and by the way, some of them, I'll just say straight up, with all the fangirls and all the sort of hype you can get in NA that you might not have in the same there's that. And then the other angle I'm going to switch to is this. The other reason for people like Aziel, why I want to make this point, is because, I said, I actually do think he has real talent. I actually think he is someone who has someone where he can speak from authority about being a world-class competitor. But as Monty said, I'm going to do a similar thing and shade into this. This is the thing I'm pissed off about. I keep making jokes, Monty, because I'm sick and tired of it. The fucking Riot broadcast at Worlds and MSI is not the LCS broadcast. Stop doing that. It's not even the LCS and LEC/Western broad. It is just the English language broadcast of the World Championship and the Mid-Season Invitational. And in fact, as a result, if you work that event, you're supposed to be like my mates work in the CSGO major. You're there to be the best in the world at your job and to showcase who the best teams are, who the best players are, and why this game is at the highest level in the world. You are not there to be a fanboy for NA. You are not there to make excuses for NA. Now listen, Like Monty said earlier, there are plenty of North Americans in esports who have very legit opinions, who don't fanboy NA, who've built whole careers. Some of them fair play to them. Like I said about Jat, I actually think Jat in the modern day doesn't homer too much. I think he's way more reasonable. I think he actually himself has been at enough worlds that he's realised, whoa, you wait and see before you hype. Here's the problem I have. Look, be biased. I love bias. Me and Monty have made our careers off bias, but make it an appropriate moment. Like, here's when you're biased for NA and your shit talk. When you have Team Liquid 2019 and they make an MSI final. Or when you have TSM 2016 or the old C9 ones, yeah, of course.
C9 wins their first best of 5 against a Korean team in NA history.
That's a good one. These are the times you hype them. Because it'd be legit and you aren't a fool. You're just slightly biased, / it's your idiosyncrasy. That is totally fine. We want personality.
The favorite one, guys. The favorite one. Did you realize that one of the major regions, does well in the situations that they're supposed to do well in? Oh, great. But the number of upsets are so rare that it just doesn't matter because we know what the ceiling of NA is.
Right, on to the next, because now I'm going to go from what someone I hate view to someone I actually love view, but I have my own struggle with, because then he says things that I just... Look, here's the problem with Kobe. He's a bit of a mimbo, isn't he? Like, he is beautiful. He is cool. He has a really nice vibe. He has some good game knowledge. He has some good things. He's got a lot of history. He's definitely fun on a cast, but he definitely says some brain dead stuff every now and then. That's, you can't have everything, Kobe. I don't look great, but I've just got all the brains and weight, haven't I? God was giving out different portions to different people, or before the game, we all leveled up our character differently, didn't we? You didn't choose to put a lot into intelligence or whatever. Like, that's just the way it goes. I'm just going to keep it real, mate, because I put all my points into keeping it real, didn't I? It's my problem. It's my strength and my weakness. So I'm going to say this, right? Kobe did a tweet where when it came to doing that bracket draw, obviously people realised, because this is how you know, Monty, they never think ahead. It's taken them till the bracket draw was done to go, wait a minute, but what happens if NA plays NA? You think that beforehand, mate. You don't need it to happen before you can say it. So obviously now people are like, oh, it's going to suck though. What if Europe's teams play each other in the lower bracket and then NA's teams play each other in the lower bracket? And we already saw those matchups, right? One, seeing the matchup, you've got to get over this NA and fucking League of Legends fans. Seeing the same matchup is not a bad thing if it happens just in the course of the tournament. You can't just have Vince McMahon come out like, whoa, we're not having fucking The Undertaker versus The Rock again. I'm inserting a brand new guy. Like, no, if that's what's going on, that's what's going on. You're not fucking wrestling, mate. You can't just come in like that. You can't have someone come in with a chair and just fucking take over the game, can you?
As much as people complain about this shit too, the reality is that the casual fans are much more likely to tune in for T1 versus Gen.G again because they know that matchup and they have certain expectation, and there's a hype and prestige that comes up with that matchup. Is it not the best for LCK potentially that the last 3 finals have all been T1 versus Gen.G? Yeah, because if a new team comes in, because we haven't had a mix-up and maybe people aren't as familiar with some of the other teams, like I imagine that if KT had made the finals, that final would have had lower viewership. And if KT had been at MSI, those matches would have had lower viewership, at least for now, because it takes time to build it up. But if you're Riot, you want Gen.G versus T1 because that's going to drive enormous viewership.
Yes. Like, so here's the point, because I didn't say the tweet here. Kobe did a tweet where he goes, what if we all agree to just redraw the bracket with the rule teams from the same region can't be on the same side of the bracket? Mix it up for fun. Deal? Now, fair enough, he did phrase it as like, mix it up for fun. Deal? Just a shower thought, I'm just off the freeze pipe. Tell you what, crazy idea. What if you... But here's the problem with that, Kobe, as like I'm going to actually legitimately analyze it. Here's the problem with that. You're not in WWE. The reason that the teams go inside the bracket is because there's an element of random draw. That's why you do a draw, you fuck. That's why you do the draw. Now, that means sometimes you're going to get a bomb one like this that you don't like. Sometimes you're going to get the best draw ever, by the way. And so the point is, this is the issue. Like, I've always hated, by the way, the fact they do it at Worlds. Like, you can't be in the same group, right? One, if you want to be practical, guys, you are aware that if real seeding was done for MSI and Worlds, they could never all be in the same group from NA because you'd all be the bottom fucking seeds. So you wouldn't all be there, would you? One would be playing number 1, one would be playing number 2, one would be playing number 3. You'd all be in different groups anyway. 2, if you actually were diverse, Monty, and there was an NA team 4th and an NA team 8th and an NA team 12th, then it'd be fine to be in the same group. It wouldn't be the end of the world. If anything, when you say that line, like, it's just a domestic matchup, then you're complaining about lack of international tournaments, not how this tournament is seeded and done. And also, I'm just going to throw this out there. when you say a line like that and you're in a Riot game and you're in a game where they already do only let 4 teams from LCK go, even if the 5th team, which by the way would have been DRX if things had gone differently, could win Worlds. Meanwhile, like the second best NA team couldn't even win Worlds. We're already in a world where we essentially tell people, oh, if you play for the 5th best Korean team, you're just not that good, mate. You don't get a World Championship. Oh, you play in the 3rd best NA team. Welcome to the World Championship. You're one of the best players in the world. And they still do it, Monty. They still say 16 best teams in the world.
We just came off a Worlds where the 4th seed from Korea.
Exactly. So it proved it, didn't it? It proved it, mate. And so then the other thing to me is this, right? When you have that world already, understand you've already fucked the ecosystem. Don't then further make it like it's your birthday party. You're like, I want a pink pony though, Mum, not a purple one though. Like, you sound so mad entitled at the idea of like, right, I just make the bracket how I want it. No, bro, the teams playing the matches and the results determine who is available within the probability to get the slot, and then random aspects to it. Here's one reason I'm with Kobe though. I don't like randomization, Monty, because remember, the way the seeding is done for this tournament treats fucking Mad Lions like they are fucking
better than
JDG and better than T1. And also they treat BLG like they're T1 as well. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing's, it's always off when you do that, because that's why you can always get really, sometimes, I mean, these are fine brackets. That's the other thing I can't handle, by the way. I'll just say it right now. I get that it's going to suck if you have the all-regional lower bracket temporarily. Won't suck for me. I want those teams out the way anyway to get the good one. But the actual up-round matches, they're good. This is even like a nice bracket.
So I think the complaint here, and I understand this. So I want to couch this. I think Kobe is just being cheeky and joking.
Oh, he is. He's not being serious.
We all wish that this had been drawn differently, but this is basically the worst possible bracket that probably could have been drawn, unfortunately. So we just have to live with that. I don't think it's a big flaw within the format. An idea that's been floated that I agree with is that you can create a system where teams from the same region can't go in the same side of the bracket, which obviously severely limits the potential matchups that could occur. But in a double elimination format, you can mess with the upper bracket a little bit more, because you always have the leeway of the lower bracket than you could in a just a single elimination tournament. So I wouldn't be bothered if at MSI they said teams from the same region can't be in the same side of the bracket. And you draw basically, I think, one team and you would know the entire rest of the bracket at that point in time. So it would be a little less random, but at the same time, we'd probably end up with more compelling international matchups. I think the problem here is that we end up with, if all the favorites win, that is Gen.G, T1, BLG, and JDG, we end up in the upper brackets with rematches of the LCK and LPL finals. We end up in the lower bracket with a rematch of the LCS finals, and we end up with a rematch of the first, like the lower bracket match between G2 and Mad Lions. Now, a lot of these matches were very exciting, very close matches, and we get to see them, first off, on a different patch, guys. You can't treat this as though this is going to be the same matchup, because most of these teams skipped multiple patches to get to MSI, and we haven't even seen Gen.G, Mad Lions, Cloud9, or JDG on this patch. Right? And some of them were playing playoffs on like 13-5, 13-6. We're on 13-8 right now. So there are pretty big differences in the matchups that we're going to see. And I don't really care. Like, I will gladly watch another match between Gen.G and T1. I wish I got to see more of them in my life. But at the same time, I think the argument is like, you know, there's a real possibility that we don't see an NA versus EU best of 5, which is definitely something that this format was trying to solve. But them's the breaks, unfortunately. That's just how it shakes out sometimes. And the format is still very good. And the later stages of this tournament are still going to be really fun.
Sure.
And also, that's accounting for the fact that people are bemoaning this now, but all it takes is one upset, and then this entire thing shakes out way different, right?
That's also the dumbest part about it, isn't it? If one upset happens, like you say, on either side of the bracket, both sets of matches don't happen. You don't get China versus China. You don't get Korea versus Korea. You don't get EU versus EU, and you don't get any versus any. So that's why I'm saying you let the players decide who plays you. Kobe's talking like they have to play each other, like, or in this case, he would make it so they can't. The reason it's also, like Kobe, why you don't do that is because you've already got scoffed enough seeding. Look, I know this isn't very likely, but remember, when you create a format with seeding, you cannot do things like, well, at the moment, Monty, Korean teams are pretty good, so this seeding would be a good... No, it's supposed to be agnostic to the regions. It's supposed... Good seeding is just who is the best. Well, obviously, in a tournament, the whole point of being number 1 seed is to play number 16, or in this case, number 8. Well, what if there was a world, it doesn't exist now, but what if there was a world where the 2 Korean teams were the number 1 and number 8 teams in the world in this tournament? That means the number 1 team just gets a harder opponent.
Yeah.
They'd have to just play the 7th best team instead of the 1st. So now that, the 2nd best team gets the better game. You know what I mean? You see what I mean about how when you tweak one thing, it's some butterfly effect shit. And also, like you've just nailed there, Kobe's doing it because his eyes are telling him, but I don't want that exact matchup again. You have to make this point before the tournament happens when it's totally no one knows. Because remember, here's the other reason that's such a worthless point. Because what if Golden Guardians didn't make it and PSG Talon did?
Yep.
Then it wouldn't even be a fucking issue, would it? So like, what are we doing here? What are we doing here?
It would still be an issue in that we would have semis that are T1, GenG, and JDG, BLG, and potentially,
I've nailed it, Monty. I've nailed what the problem is. Here's the real problem, and no one's saying it. The problem isn't MSI 2023. The problem is the last few worlds have unfortunately yielded the China versus China brackets and the LCK versus LCK. Too many times we've accidentally got those brackets. And because it's happened, everyone was saying it you'll have seen it on Reddit. There's a mad thing where like Caps has never faced an LPL team if an LCK team was available. Chovy has never faced a fucking non-Korean mid laner in a playoff series, even though these guys have all been to a whole bunch of worlds in the last 3-4, I get as to why that sucks, but that's just random. That's what I always point this out. People don't get this. The reason random seeding sucks is you can get the best possible seeding. It's random, contains every pattern. You can also get the worst possible seeding. I just want real seeding or something approaching it. Like I said this years ago, you don't have to really do it, Monty, because obviously the hardest thing would be who gets to be number 1, LPL or LCK. You make more tiers. Instead of having 2 groups, make it 4. If you just had it look, number 1 from both LPL and LCK, they're always number 1. That'd again be vaguely more reasonable. You know what I mean? So I have a problem in general with that whole seeding thing, because that's where all this comes from. It's not what the matchup at the end is. That's the end of the process.
Yeah, like I said, I think there are ways that you could do it by making it so that regions can't be in the same side of the bracket if your goal is to create a more interesting first round of the tournament. I mean, the real problem here is this.
Why is that your goal, though? Bro, we've only just, Monty, got a second good actual tournament that isn't Korea.
I don't care that much.
You know what I mean?
I don't care that much because I think this draw was an aberration and is unlikely to be repeated. It was just unlucky. But I still think I think it's a minor thing. I think the format is still good. This could have shaken out in a variety of different ways that would have been acceptable to people. I mean, really what people wanted. And
the low bracket will take care of it. That's what they're forgetting, Monty. They're looking at this. This is why you know it's Euro and Western-centric, Monty. They're looking at, like you had said, they're already predicting all the Western teams lose. So they're already it's going to suck when C9... No, bro... After that, though, it doesn't matter. Here's the one that I don't even get what you even mentioned earlier as a potential downside. Why is it a problem that in the upper semi-finals, JDG and BLG could play and Gen.G and T1, they're the 4 best teams in the tournament. And, spoiler, they're going to go in the lower bracket, half of them, and it's going to mix up. Yep. They're going to flip the bracket. So if you know what's sick about that? People don't know what double elim is still. They don't know the second round flips. So you don't always have it. This only in this particular case. And by the way, it's not like we're repeating from this tournament. We're just repeating from domestic. That can happen. And and as you say, it's only going to happen because you're bad. Oh, the 2 best. Basically, I'll reframe what he said. Let's change the format, Monty, so that if NA is the worst, they can't play each other in a low match.
Right.
So, what are you talking about? You know what I mean?
Here's that's what I was going to say. Here's what people are actually mad about. Because what they wanted was some Golden Guardians versus Mad Lions and C9 versus G2 shit where a Western team would advance into the upper bracket semifinals. So they're mad that isn't a guaranteed result. In terms of competitiveness, guys, in terms of competitiveness and advancing the 4 best teams from this tournament to the next round of the tournament, which is what a tournament is designed to do, this is a great bracket. This is a great bracket at doing that, right? In fact, you could say that Riot, had they seeded this according to team strength. Think about that. Think if they had seeded this according to team strength and you actually had them ranked 1 through 8, could you have come up with potentially a better bracket than this one?
I think this is a plausible bracket.
It's a plausible bracket if you rank the teams 1 through 8.
Dude, Gen.G would play BLG. I would have had them 4th and Gen.G first.
Think about it. You have Gen.G and Gen.G. So, by the way, Riot did say that Gen.G and Gen.G had to be on opposite sides of the bracket, which was great.
Yeah, they're the number one seeds. Like I said, you can have that tier. That's a tier, like I said. Yeah.
Yep.
Do that.
And so then they put Cloud9 and Mad Lions into the tier 2 and everyone else into the tier 3. Now, you would have also said that, T1 and BLG should be on opposite sides of the bracket, which they ended up being because of that seeding system. So they did kind of soft seed the teams. But in terms of making it so that there are clear favorites in the first round of a tournament, which you do in sports, by the way, look at the NHL, NBA, playoffs, et cetera, this is a plausible bracket that you could have come up with. I wouldn't necessarily say that G2 was like 7th or 8th best team in this tournament when, the NA teams exist, but you could make that argument if you think that Cloud9 deserves to be 6th seed from winning NA and G2, qualified ending 4th place in LEC. I think you could make a compelling argument that puts them in 7th or 8th place and therefore in the position to face Gen.G in the first round. Same thing with Golden Guardians, runner-up in LCS. Seems like they could be a 7th or 8th place team to face JDG, could be faced seeded 1st or 2nd. So this is all to say that what fans are really angry about, if we get it to its core, is that they don't have the Western matchups and a team like a close match that could result in a team advancing to the winners bracket finals. But the next question is, what happens in those winners bracket finals? Well, one of the Asian teams comes and just bops the winner of that match. And then we get a shitty upper semi. So you want an upset, but it doesn't actually make sense if you are testing for who is the best team in this tournament when the answer is definitively that these 4 teams should be the favorites. They should be advancing into the next round of the playoffs. And why people are mad is because they assume all these teams are going to lose, which is fair because each of these matchups on paper is ludicrously one-sided. Like, I don't even think it's close. In a normal tournament, you would say it's probable that one of the underdogs will win.
Like you said, the C9 one would be the closest you'd come here.
Yeah, 1 out of 4 in a normal tournament. 1 out of 4
totally
of
there's
probably an upset in 1 out of the 4 games. It seems really unlikely that there is going to be an upset in any of these matches.
Yes,
which is unusual for a tournament. But that's also because Riot insists on not bringing the best teams in the world to these tournaments. Like, there's not a universe where most of these teams are better than KT.
Oh, there's another thing, Monte. If this was CSGO and you had the same format, then think about it, right? You would have like 4 Korean teams, 4 or 5 LPL teams. So as a result, you wouldn't even care about this topic. You just go, I can't wait for this double limb bracket. See however fuck you want. It's going to be amazing, wouldn't it? It's just another Western fucking centric take.
It boils down to literally this, Thorin. Mad cause bad. Bad. Yeah. You're mad at the bracket draw because the teams are bad and they don't. If we're being real, they don't deserve to be here over most of the other LPL and LCK teams who could be here. So we have a garbage bracket, unfortunately, but in some ways it's very good because you want to see these teams moving on to the upper bracket. So
also, can you 2 guys get together and like figure out your takes consistently? Because technically, Kobe isn't even in the same camp as Azale. Because we all know if the 2 NA teams lose, then it's impossible for both NA teams to come last place in the bracket. So if anything, Azale will be going, "Hey, NA came fucking 5th to 6th at the MSI, bitch. What up? Where's G2 at?" If they like lose their match to Mad Lions, and we're like, "Come on, bro, give me a break, will you?"
Yeah, I mean, like, also if BLG goes into the losers bracket, there's a world where we could see an upset of BLG in the losers bracket.
Yeah,
like,
why not?
There have been real weaknesses to BLG. I don't think they're enough to have a Western team beat them, but maybe.
I mean, if I had to pick one, I actually think like Mad Lions could be spicy for them, mate. Elyoya and Niski could get busy with fucking BLG. I think that would be an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to get through quite a few opponents in order to do that, so I just don't think it's likely to occur. But
I'm just saying if I could draw the bracket like that, you know?
Yeah. Look, I think BLG could lose to a Western team. I think that is a possibility. Do I think that is a likely possibility? No, but I do think it's more likely than JDG, T1, or Gen.G losing to a Western team.
By the way, before we talk more about the bracket, do you have any stuff from the actual play-ins that needs to be discussed? Like we need to record for history, or someone did like a mega performance. Is there something you want to talk about?
I think it's pretty shocking that Latin America and Brazil did better than Vietnam and LJL, considering that LJL has been able to pull off some, random upset wins.
And they got Arya back on DFM. Like he came back, guys. Like, that's supposed to be the guy.
I mean, they lost Evie, but yeah, sure.
He's a fraud, man. I don't give a fuck about him. He can stay gone.
He always did well internationally. Like he was kind of weird, but he had his moments.
Yeah, but I also need him in LEC because he's supplying me all those straight fire tweet stories. Remember, like all that mad shit about fucking Yankos or whatever. Like, I love that guy. So, love him.
I mean, it's disappointing that they got 2-0'd, especially in what ended up being a very weak side of the bracket.
Oh, by the way, also props to LGL. This is how you know Japan is on some level, some sort of like vassal state of the United States still, because and also uses the other vassal of Korea, because they also exploit the fuck out of importing Koreans like a motherfucker. Like every single time, it's like, how many Koreans can you get in one team? They're another one that's just going for it, like all of them. We got them all. Like it's mad, isn't
it? I'm sad that I'm still disappointed by Arya. I was actually really hyped for him to be on KT last year, and I don't know why DFM really didn't do anything this tournament. Like I said, especially like it turns out they got a very weak side of the bracket because PSG, Loud, and DFM were all kind of underwhelming in the end. But I mean, it's impressive that we saw R7 like beat Vietnam, especially because Vietnam keeps getting hyped up. They have a really strong player base in Vietnam, like really huge. That player base watches a lot of international gameplay. If you watch LCK on YouTube, by the way, the English channel, the entire YouTube chat on the VOD, I mean, it's live, right? But I watch the VODs. The entire YouTube chat is in Vietnamese. It's like they're all LCK, man. They're all watching the English broadcast on YouTube, and they have a huge domestic audience. So you would expect with the enthusiasm for these guys to be better, but I mean, Vietnam, the last few tournaments just hasn't really delivered in the way.
I understand they had all those years where they didn't go to Worlds. I get that. But the reason why it also sucks is if people don't know, like the core of this GAM lineup has been together for a few years now. They've all been there. And they also got an import back. They got old Levi back years ago.
Yeah.
By the way, Monte, go quickly now and look on Gamepedia. Everyone knows I'm not someone, first of all, I've lived in Korea. I'm not some ignorant person who just thinks like all Asians look the same in the same way as some Koreans think all Europeans look the same. Just look on Levi's page on Gamepedia, Monte. And as you look at his photo for the first time, just listen to this name, Innovation from StarCraft 2.
He does look exactly
like him. That is crazy how much he looks like him, isn't it? But when I see it, he looks so much like him. It's crazy, isn't it? Just in that photo, probably. But it just looks like Innovation stuck in the tournament. Like,
right.
Just did this with his hair. Like, I am Levi from Gigabyte Marines. Also, spoiler, Innovation was Terran. He used Marines all the time. Just saying. I'm just saying.
All the clues point to it. Also, he could have been taught by his brother, Gumayushi, too.
There you go. It's getting suspicious, isn't it? I'm just saying there's a lot of circumstantial evidence around here. Who's under that mask?
So, I mean, and Levi also obviously played on JDG. He played in NA.
He's a very experienced player.
Yeah, a very good import prospect. Certainly, like, really talented. And yeah, they haven't been able to lead this team to any kind of international success, and that's disappointing to see Japan and Vietnam drop out with only a single game win between them. I think was pretty shocking. Although very good for LLA. I mean, LLA continues to import a variety of Korean players, and same thing with Brazil. And they're getting the kind of these up and coming Korean players. And Dom and I had this conversation on Power Spike, which is that the Latin American and Brazilian teams tend to take the Koreans that are kind of starting out their careers and who are really hungry. Remember, Ole came out of Brazil. Yep. Crown came out of Brazil. So there have been players down there who have had a lot of success and have parlayed that into really long and fruitful playing careers. And I think, outside of some kind of big mistakes, I mean, Croc not buying a jungle item was pretty egregious, but this is probably, the nerves in this kind of tournament really get to you. And I think that was just an unfortunate circumstance, but even then they nearly beat G2. So, yeah, I mean, there was some hype from Bong in the match against the Gigabyte Marines. Yeah, I mean, look, or GAM Esports, whatever they're called now. They're not called Gigabyte Marines anymore. We just call them that because that was their old name.
Why is that still a thing in esports where you go, hey guys, we're going to have a rebrand? It's just fucking rebrand. No, what we're going to do is rebrand as our acronym, but it's not an acronym. I'm out. That's like some EG level fucking rebrand shit, mate. Just miss me on that one. Just do a real proper rebrand. Just pick a different name. And also, am I missing something? Dude, Gigabytes Marine is a cool name.
Yeah, just call yourself the Marines. It's fine. But yeah, I think that was a bit surprising to me, but ultimately it doesn't really matter because all of those teams were eliminated. But that's the whole point of MSI, is that I think the play-ins were really fun because we got to see minor region games in a best of 3 against each other, right? This is going to activate those fan bases. It's going to please people to be able to say like one team definitively beat the other one in a series and not in a bunch of consecutive random like best of ones where it could end 2-2, for example, in previous MSIs. So this was fun. And we also didn't have to see a bunch of one-sided stomps because at least we got to see the lower bracket teams and we got a sense of where all of these top teams from each of their regions are going to shake out. And now we don't have to see them anymore. It's great. Love this format.
I'm different because here's the problem. In CSGO, I've said this my whole career, I don't even give a fuck if you drop out the top 10, mate. Come back when you're in the top 10. I don't care to watch tier 2, any esport. There's too many esports now, and I follow more than one, and I follow sports. So I pick and choose the best matches in the world to watch. Sure. I want to watch the best player. So quite frankly, luckily now, MSI has this banging best of 5 double in bracket. So I'm going to get enough of those matches finally. That's not a problem. It used to kill me back in the day, the way Worlds would be all this playing shit, and then I get the BO1s like, oh, yeah. Bloody hell,
Look, it was 1 week of this. And now we've got 2 weeks of the good shit. So now the good shit lasts for most of the tournament. Yeah. By the way, Thorin, in the next week, we have 8 best of 5s. We have 8 best of 5s, which is a lot. By the way, also counters Riot's entire premise about their tournament. So you're telling me you could do 8 best of 5s in 1 fucking week, but you can't run more than 3 best of 5s in the last 2 weeks of Worlds. I mean, you just expose yourself here, Riot, about your stupid bullshit that you've had for years about formats, where all of a sudden you can do this thing. By the way, they're doing it by not changing venues. Not changing venues during the entirety of MSI, which allows them to run a proper format. You do not need to move cities every week, Riot. The live audience is like 1% of your viewership. It doesn't fucking matter. Please make better formats for Worlds that use the time that you have and don't move cities, or at least don't move cities for the last 2 weeks. Have groups in a different spot, have playoffs in a different spot, done. Problem solved. Or have quarters in a different spot. Like, you can figure this out in a way that actually makes sense. Rent a smaller venue so that you can fill it up for 6 best of 5s, right? Figure it out.
I also always thought it was mad when they used to just move even like between fucking like portions of the tournament. Like, so if you watched the quarters in that Worlds in 2015, you were in like London. And then, like, for after that, you were in, like, fucking Paris or something. It's like, how is a fan supposed to watch the whole thing? Yeah, he has to, like, follow the band on tour around the world. What are we doing here? Like, if I want tickets, I want tickets. But what if my team wins? Oh, I can't wait to see the semi. Oh, wait, actually, yeah, I'm just living in this country, aren't I? So, fuck me. I'm literally not a rich jet setter. I'm not a Riot exec who thinks, yeah, let them eat cake Monte in France and then Germany and then the UK. I mean,
like, they've also done away with all of their best opportunities in order to have a new Worlds format. Like, famously, when they were in one location in Iceland, they should have just pivoted the format to have double elimination and have more games because they weren't moving. Now, they could also do the same thing this year in Korea. Korea is a fucking small country, guys. It's not that hard for people to move around. Like, I get that you want some of the matches to be in Busan, but you really only need games in Busan and then somewhere in the Seoul, Incheon area. And anyone in the country can get there on a bullet train in 3 hours. So if you want tickets, it's not fucking hard to, like, go to a game, then go home immediately afterwards, right? Or stay one night at a cheap-ass hotel. You can stay
and as you say, very, very cheap places to stay too. Yeah, with good internet, everything.
You can literally sleep in a Jimchilbang, which is a bathhouse. You can go to a bathhouse for like $10, sleep in the bathhouse, take a bath, refresh yourself, and just get on a train the next morning. It's like, it's not expensive.
To be fair, even the Goshi hotels are pretty fucking cheap, especially if you're not in Seoul. But it's insanely cheap, of course.
Yeah. Anybody can do it, guys.
Yeah.
Like, you can figure it out.
By the way, I'll also say this. I do notice, I watch all these different shows and broadcasts. I'm not going to get into it myself, but I'm just going to say it is curious. After all those worlds we had in China, no one ever talks about why we don't have events in China anymore. What's going on? Do we just not like China? What's going on, guys? Again, I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm a little dick.
We
so
will
I'm
next
fucking
year,
point it out.
sure.
Oh, I'm sure eventually, but just curious, isn't it? It's weird how it works.
Well, I think, to be fair, like, obviously part of that was the insane lockdowns, but they even did have an event in China during the lockdowns. And I also think because they had back-to-back worlds in China that it got kind of, taken away. So we'll see where I think Worlds will probably be in China next year.
Yeah, but here's the problem, Monte. I'm sick of them justifying everything else based on viewership, but then like having the event held in a place that won't bring the most viewership. Like, well, which is it, brother? What are we picking? Because you can have one or the other. You got to be consistent, though. So don't do. Sadly, I'm talking to Riot Games here. Wait a minute. You mean, Thorin? I can't just, in one sense, pick one thing and then talk to the other thing. But I do that all the time. Like, I know that.
I would not be shocked, Thorin, if this was the last Worlds in North America this year.
It should be. Come on.
It should be. If
There's
we're
been
being
a lot
honest,
there. There's been a lot of fucking
be.
MSIs and Worlds there. Come on, boys. We're giving you a good chance.
The time zone is so terrible. And just objectively, guys, like the best time to do these tournaments is going to be at the time they're at right now, which is like noon in the UK/Europe, around noon, which is about 7 a.m. on the East Coast of the United States, and it's evening in Asia. And that is just, if you want to capture the largest viewership, that is when you do the events. It sucks. And literally the only people it sucks for is West Coast America, which is at 3 or 4 a.m. And I live there, so it does fucking suck. I will tell you that. But the West Coast of the United States is such a small percentage of the League of Legends viewership. Also, you have to remember that Brazil now has higher viewership than North America for League of Legends, and Brazil is 2 hours ahead of the East Coast. So it's a good time for Brazil as well. So there really is just no reason, honestly, to do anything in a time zone that works. And even in the US, like 2/3 of the population is at 6 or 7 a.m. That's not terrible to wake up for. And at least you're going to be able to catch the later games, because it's going to go until like noon, Eastern time. So it's all to say that I really think that running more international events in NA is just a huge mistake. And we should probably see them just in Europe. If I was running this thing, I would really just focus on Europe and Asia from this point forward.
Should we get into some of the matchups? Because there's some fun ones here, some really fun ones. Like one that, like we said it earlier, so let's just do the most competitive one in terms of if you want the Western upset. It is quite clearly the Cloud9 BLG one. That's just your best chance. Because if you look at it, obviously on BLG, you've got some inexperienced players. It's not like they're people who've been to 10 worlds and won them and are. No, you've got some players where they're inexperienced. They could easily shit the bed. That happens even to great players from Asia. Secondly, BLG was kind of a miracle to even make it to MSI. There was loads of teams people had before them. And then on top of that, you look at who are the big names on BLG. The big names are like Yagao, has never been, by the way, like a god mid laner. I would even say someone like Caps at their peak is better than Yagao. Elk is a total rookie, essentially, in this scenario. So I think that, and Bin, mate, you saw that last MSI. Yeah, in the finals, he was money. He was dog shit before that. So, like, these players, there's flaws there, mate. There's flaws that are exploitable. It's just the problem I have is this better be the best Cloud9 I've seen whole year. They're all year long if you want that to happen,
Yeah, when we say that this has the best chance of an upset, we mean that in the sense, so there's two things. First off, it's because Billy, I think, has been the weakest performer, especially at MSI, which, might be true of T1, GenG, or JDG. Like, sometimes Chinese teams show up to these international events and just completely eat shit. Like, that happens, right? Although I will say it's rarely at MSI, because they frequently win MSI, and it's usually not the top Chinese team that eats shit at these international events. Although sometimes you just fun post
World's the number one sometimes fucks it, but yeah. Because top and FPX
but they've been good at MSI. So it's usually not the top Chinese seed. It's usually one of the lower ones. But the thing about Billy is we saw this last year with Yagao as well, where he had just a sensational LPL summer playoff run, and it wasn't quite as good. The later it got on, I think the worse Yagao performed this year in the LPL playoffs. But in this particular instance, we are seeing Billy struggle in the mid lane much more than we might have expected during the play-in stage.
Yep.
And it's not like they were facing some world beaters on the side of their bracket. Granted, I do think Gory is the best mid laner in North America and would be legitimately good on an LCK team. And he has, Gory and River synergy are what has made this team. So also the possibility that they kind of look bad as a result of that. However, Elk has been the standout player on BLG. You can see how hard they're destroying lane and how hard he's carrying some of these games. Bin has been also a little bit on the weaker side overall. So I don't think that is going to be enough. But if you had to create a matchup where you were saying, like, can Fudge and Blaber and MNS maybe finesse something on the top side of the map in order to get these leads, because we saw what happened when Licorice had a big lead against Bin in game number 2. Licorice was able to play very well alongside the rest of alongside Gory and River to target Elk to come back in what appeared to be, frankly, an unwinnable game. Like that, the bot lane disaster that occurred for Golden Guardians should have made that game unwinnable. Part of why it was winnable was really good play by Golden Guardians around assassinating Elk in the backline. They did an excellent job of chaining their crowd control to make sure that he died even through a Lulu ultimate, and they got the positioning and knew their win condition. That was, good play. Number 2 is they had the draft to do it, right? And one thing about Golden Guardians has been that they have had really good drafts throughout this tournament, and that has given them massive advantages. They draft gapped PSG Talon so hard in that best of 5, it was unbelievable. And then Billy, but the problem is that Billy also won all 3 games early very convincingly, and if they had snowballed the second game better, they should have won that game if we're being real. That was like a almost guaranteed win that they managed to throw away.
Yes.
So can Cloud9 win 3 games out of 5 against Billy? Fudge looked really good throughout the playoffs in LCS. MNS has been hit or miss. We remember some of his good LeBlanc games. We choose to forget some of his terrible Jace games. He can totally sprint it in the mid lane. So perhaps it's good that he's not facing somebody like Chovy or Faker or some of these, Knight, some of these other players that are going to be at this tournament, because they'll be exploited less. Blaber and Fudge have to make this work because the bot lane, even though they were the best bot lane in North America, Sven is not a world-class support player. Okay? He still has a lot of holes in his game because he's a new support player. And also support was a shockingly weak position in NA this year. This year, the support players have been quite bad overall in North America, so he hasn't been challenged. And to go into these duo lanes against players like, Ruler and Missing and Gumayushi and Keria and Pays and Delight, this is going to be really hard. Elk is probably the easiest bot lane that they are going to face. And even Elk was completely dominating Golden Guardians in the lane phase.
Here's the problem I have with this matchup. Go on.
No, it's just can they, as good as Berserker is, I just don't think they're going to get advantages in the 2v2, so that it has to come through Fudge and Blaber, basically.
Right, first of all, if anyone out there looks and goes, well, immediately Berserker has an advantage, you have to put the Kool-Aid down. You are only watching the LCS, where all I'll say is this. You have Berserker and you have Prince. Who the fuck else even matters at ADC in that region? And then, as Monty said, he's paired with Sven, who, if anything, we're giving props to. Wow, you win the title. Well done. You're not world class. If you don't know, guys, Elk was on the all LPL second team as AD carry. It's the region of fucking Uzi and Wei Zhao and Nami. They produce fucking AD carry. Spoiler, if you're hyped about Berserker, you better be mega hyped about Elk. That's the universe telling you, watch out, he's really good. So actually the Berserker advantage is gone. Maybe Elk is even better. We'll see. Then when you go to the other roles, look, I'll give you that there's a world where I could see MNS having a pop-off 1 game against Yagao. Because what people don't know about Yagao, the reason I think he is overrated is, 1, he did just happen to have some clutch finals performances, which was better than his overall normal level. And 2, he bizarrely always gets the better at least in team-wise, of Knight, right? Well, what people don't know is that's because, like a fucking anime, they are from the same city and, like, grew up as friends and have just, like, known each other the whole time. So it's like the one guy where, even though I actually think Knight's way better than Yagao, it's the one guy who's sort of in his head still and has had some, like, weird one-on-one, like, direct matchups that have just worked. So essentially, I think Yagao ends up looking a little bit boosted, which is why when he goes international, he isn't like the fucking MVP of the tournament. He isn't blowing people up the server or beating Koreans, etc. He's not doing that. So look, that's to say there's an opening there. There's a little gap in the door. Can Jimenez run an elbow? No. Right. First of all, when I watched him in LCS, he had a couple of games that were screamers early on, mate. He had somewhere it was like, why? I even made the tweet on one of his first games, like, bro, this Cloud9's new mandate for mid lane, anyone except Jensen's allowed to play this. Like, what the fuck's going on? Like, did they just put anyone in? Yeah, he had a couple of games he smurfed. I'll use the same concept as Berserker. Who the fuck is the mid lane talent in NA? Monte just said it. Golden Guardians Gory is the best mid lane, and the reason Golden Guardians is at the tournament.
By the way.
Vikla, by the end of the split, had really collapsed. Bjergsen never turned up and fucking retired after how the split went. Who else has even left? Like, mid lane is so weak in NA now. It's really brutal, guys. So the whole Jimenez angle, I already thought y'all were fucking on the copium when you were trying to put him all pro first or whatever, but this is ridiculous. Then let's go to the Blaber one. That's actually your best angle. I could see, well, I've seen Blaber have pop-offs even internationally. I still think he's unreliable, but in single games, he could definitely have a pop-off and carry some of these games. My problem is the Fudge one as well. I think, again, y'all have got too much hopium in that freeze pipe for me. Because here's the problem, dude. We're talking about Bin here. Now, look, Bin is feast or famine, but when he feasts, mate, he fucking feasts, doesn't he? He's the guy who might just smash you in lane like 5-0 and just disrespect you, be killing you under the tower and getting out. Yeah, look, because he's feast or famine, he'll have a game like he did in this Play-Ins. He'll have a game where he just shits the bed too. That's who he is. It's the reason why, by the way, he's not on RNG anymore. And they were happy to say, even though we won MSI with you and you had a great finals performance, get the fuck out of this team. So, yeah, he has his problems, but I know everyone loves Fudge from interviews in the stream, but I only watch him on the fucking LCS game, so I don't have this image of him, Monte, as some like all-time great player. Look, he's not from the West anyway, but you know, not some all-time great non-Korean. He's just, for me, he's above average, or he's like sometimes the like second or third best top in LCS. He's not even some monster. Like people, because here's the problem, Monte. I don't want to live in a world where people critique fucking Perkz as though he's shit, but then Bjergsen's allowed to do what he wants. Alfari has to just win everything, or he's a bum. But Fudge is allowed to just, it's just all right. It was Worlds. What, they're not expected to win, are they? Like, no. This is supposed to be the best NA team, the dominant NA team, and these are all pro players. Remember that. These are players voted best in their region at their role. So actually, you know what? Because he's feast or famine, Bin should be someone who's viable. Remember, China also has some god-tier fucking top laners. Bin's one of the ones you should want for this. He's going to be a bit streaky. He's going to have a game he might shit the bed. If you just add it all together, I also think just as a team, BLG is just more coherent. I think even though we go into it like this could be the upset, it's probably just 3-1 BLG if I had to guess. I think you get a game if you see 9, there'll be one that'll happen, but it's just 3-1 BLG for me.
I think that's probably fair for where they rank up right now. Like I said, this is the hopium angle that you have. There's also the fact that Fudge really hasn't done well internationally.
Yeah, where's this coming from? He's some monster, yeah.
So he did have the one MSI where he was really good, but the rest of his team was just so tragic that he looked very good in comparison to how the rest of Cloud9 was doing. And I will make an excuse, which is at Worlds last year, he had role swap to mid, then role swap back to top lane, and he did look not as good in the summer split in top lane either as he did the previous year. So now he's had that offseason. Now he's back in form in the top lane. So it's time to put up or shut up, because if any opponent is beatable, it should be Billy. It should be Billy for a Western team in this bracket.
And by the way, before you all do that thing of like, but we never even said Fudge was that good. You're just taking a straw man and getting one guide. First of all, if Dom gets one guide, think by definition what all of you who get triggered by all Dom's opinions are. You're getting one guide. He's called Dom. He's the one guy. Stop fucking watching the one guy. You can't do that. Then the other thing is this. I don't know if you remember this, Monte. Part of the discussion, you remember, for MVP wasn't just, is it fucking like Blaber or Prince or Berserker? It was, is it Fudge, Blaber or Berserker? He was supposed to be an MVP candidate. Bro, if you're an MVP candidate for a region, show up internationally. Show me some games that are good. Show me like someone like a Caps can. You can even go toe-to-toe with your rival player from another region. You can actually have games where you beat him. Like, because again, like you said, this is the beatable one. Look, I actually think, no joke, with this current format, if they keep it, I don't know if you're ever going to get a team like BLG again. Remember, like, there's a world where LPL was way more stacked than this. Korea is stacked as fuck at their top two. This is one of your rare chances for this format. Because, by the way, there's the downside. Here's where I pull the rug on you all, okay? You all thought I was taking you on the Magic Capra. A whole new world, lower brackets, rematches, na-na-na. You all thought that. No, it was a whole new world for me. Because remember that thing I said about 10 minutes ago? I'm an elitist, and I love that shit. So the reason why I love this format, Monty, is because after the first round, we get rid of all the Western trash, get them out the way. We start having the LPL and the LCK. And then, in the lower bracket, we get rid of all the Western trash and we start having the LPL. That's why I love it. Y'all are going to hate it because what's going to happen is it's going to get really boring after the low bracket round.
Having the top two seeds from both Korea and China. And we protected ourselves from any possible upsets by having a lower bracket. So we just get more LCK versus LPL games. That's the dream. I agree with you.
Perfect, isn't it? Exactly. But if you're a Western fan, like I've set you up, but the problem is unless you are me, like essentially you're like Moses. You can't come to the promised land with you. With me, like, you know, it's not for you, boys. Sorry, what about this then? I actually think after that, the fun one for me is actually the Gen.G G2 one. I know some people, we'll get to it later, mate, are going to have mad
This is a horrible matchup for G2.
Oh, it is? But, mate, you have to ask, but is Mad Lions going to beat T1, are they? In no fucking universe. Kazi is going to get absolutely violated. That's already on the table. I'll tell you right now, Chasey is... Listen, I've had plenty of fucking beef with Zeus. He is going to murder Chasey. Absolutely. By the way, the fact he's Korean even, I think they're going to go hard as fuck on these guys, by the way. Then you Niski versus Faker. The joke is, Faker has perfected Niski's old play style. He's just better at it than he ever was. So that's already off the table. You can forget the fucking... Look, the jungle one's not terrible, except for the fact that, like, you can't 1v9. You can't carry the whole game. Like, that's not going to happen. And so where do you win? And spoiler, probably the best player in the world plays support for T1. Like, it's game over there. Like, look, here's what you could have. If you're Mad Lions, it's a bit like Cloud9. You're hoping for the one game where Hylissang pops off, Elyoya gets a nice start, Niski just does okay. That can happen in a game. So that's a 3-1. Here's the reason why the Gen.G G2 one's interesting to me, Monty. Because you have the aspect from BLG, which is technically the bot lane could just choke. Why couldn't the bot lane of Gen.G choke internationally? Remember, here's the difference, Monty. If you're a Westerner, you choke because suddenly you have to prove it. If you're an Asian player, you choke because you're supposed to be the best in the world. You're supposed to win the tournament. I think the pressure is different. They're from different sides. Like essentially, people are like, you're actually not good enough if you're from the West. If you're the Korean team, it's like you must be the absolute best. And if you don't, you know the comments they say on DC Inside of fucking Indian, then don't come home. They say that for real. If people don't know, that's a famous thing that Habib said that his mother used to say to him when he would fight in the streets. He would go like, mother, I got into a fight. And she would go like, something like, did you win? He's like, yes. And he'd be like, why did you ask that? And she's like, because if you don't win, don't come home. And that's the reason why that guy was like one of the greatest MMA fighters of all time. That's the fucking level they're on over there, mate. So as a result, there's a world where, look, Perkz and Delight, Perkz especially looked amazing in LCK, but he's never been internationally.
Look,
I don't know what's going to happen here.
All I'm going to say about Perkz is that we obviously had these concerns about him being a rookie, and he was phenomenal in the later stage, especially in the stadium matches. And this is going to be probably, I think it's a smaller venue than he played in for LCK. And yeah, I agree with you. There is additional pressure at an international event. It's also a different patch. But for the most part, I think Perkz's champion pool remains pretty undisturbed compared to what we saw in the finals. So he should be on a variety of comfort picks. The problem for me is in the Gen.G versus G2 matchup. You have to ask yourself, like, where is the potential choke going to come from, and what are the strengths of?
Let me set it up for you. Who was the MVP of the last LEC split? Not this one.
I actually don't recall.
It was Mykles from G2.
Oh, that's right. Oh, of course. That's who I voted for.
That's the best matchup you can
win.
In this series. I actually think Mykles could potentially outperform Delight. Why couldn't he? Also, remember, Mykles, like Hylissang, is another player who can be feast or famine, and they just have those games where they get the champion, they pop off. And also, I'll add in one other factor. Like Hylissang, Mykles is one of the rare Westerners who has name value with Koreans. They know who this guy is, bro. People like Delight were watching Mykles beat T1 and damn well. Like, they respect these guys.
Korea was commenting on Mickey X recently too.
Fair enough. No surprise. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think Mickey X did have.
I think they're going to play with respect in that bot lane, mate.
Yeah, and I think Mickey X, what was so surprising about him in spring was the amount of effect he was having roaming on the map, even on champions like Heimerdinger, where it was really apparent that he was doing a lot of work. I think he absolutely deserved that MVP. I talked about it a lot. See, I remember who I
Winter.
think
You meant Winter for that one.
Other people, going back to the All Pro conversation, sometimes it's a whack ass shit. So I thought somebody else had gotten it, but no, I think he was great. But the problem with G2 is that people are going to be hyped up off of Broken Blade's performances. Guys, he was playing against Ozzy and Robo, whatever his name is, and they only played the 4 games, and they were in the weaker bracket of the play-in groups. So what did we learn about Broken Blade? I guess he can dominate tops that are just worse. Like, we've seen his performances when he's up against some of the, more amateur or, like, I would say rookie Korean tops within Europe. And what's going to happen when he has to play? Thorin may not be an absolute world beater by any means, but Thorin had a really good performance in the later stages of the LCK playoffs, and he's solid enough. And I think the real problem here for me, Thorin, is that so much of the game plan from G2 is we want to enable Yike.
Oh, by the way, I was wrong. Apparently, they gave it a Caps last split. But anyway, keep going.
Oh, but Mickey X deserved
it. I thought he did, yeah.
Like,
apparently, they gave it a Caps. Okay, it's fair enough.
Yeah, that's outrageous. But anyway, Thorin, the answer is, of course they did.
He was our MVP. That's what matters. He was our MVP.
He was the real MVP.
Exactly, yes. There you go. There you go.
That's outrageous, actually. But anyway, yeah, that's why I asked. I was like, did they give it to the right person? Of course they didn't. But when we look at Gen.G's style and performances versus G2's style and performances, so many of G2's games are about Yike is on a carry jungler. Here he comes on the Belveth or the Nidalee or the Kha'Zix, and we are going to play Gragas or now Nautilus or Sejuani in the mid lane. Like, we have these flex picks. And on top of that, G2 will have a game plan in order. We've talked all year about how G2 has set plays at level 1. They have tons of these set jungle plays that are intended to, like, follow through with a dive or get a larger amount of camps in a first jungle clear for Yike. And it's really obvious that they try and get him ahead, and the rest of the players are playing around his carry junglers. Now, that's fine. The problem with doing that against Gen.G is that Gen.G is the team least likely to be affected by you doing that. Because first off, they will know you're going to do it because they will watch the matches and be prepared. Secondly, they are probably the most intelligent macro team in the world, so they will simply avoid the situations where you are going to be ahead, or they will have warding patterns where they're going to catch you and then they're just going to do a weird clear that is going to not give Yike some kind of advantage. And Yike has broken down when it comes to mid and late game decision making. He's still a rookie, like, it's understandable. But the thing about it is that Gen.G is not going to opt into stupid fights with you. So you're not going to get some of the advantages that you might get against other teams. They will literally just play the opposite side of the map, get advantages there, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a Drake fight where you're down 4,000 gold because you weren't farming as effectively. And so I don't really know, like, this narrative about, yeah, G2 has weird picks, but you have to, and weird picks have thrown Gen.G, to be fair, okay? But that's like T1 doing weird team compositions where they execute it really well in the mid and late game. G2 doesn't do that. It's like they get an early advantage through set plays, and then they can snowball it. But if you aren't getting that, if G2 doesn't get that advantage, we know what they look like. They don't look good a lot of the time. And I just think Gen.G, it's very hard to get edges on them, especially in gold, because they will sacrifice Drakes in order to get gold on the top side of the map.
I mean, by the way, I've said it. I think all the Asian teams are winning this first round matchup. It's not It's not even that close to me. It's just I'm finding angles. Another one, if you want to see some positives for G2, is as much as everyone's styled on the fact that Broken Blades had a lot of bad international performances. Look, I'm no Thorin hater, but he's not a truly world-class player. He's just like a good player who can fit his role. Yeah, exactly. He's never even trying to be like, he's never trying to be best top player in the world. So at least that gives you a chance if you're Broken Blade. You can bring out one of your weird picks and maybe make something work in win one game or something. The big problem you have in general, this team, is what you said. Ultimately, G2's worst part is late game if they didn't get a big lead or Caps didn't get going. Whereas Gen.G is the ultimate team to just sit there and go, throw it what you want at us. Oh, you didn't knock us out, we win, and sort of like Muhammad Ali rope-a-doped you out. See ya.
It's also really hard a lot of the time to play against Gen.G because of the amount of mid prio that they have with Chovy. Because Chovy will either
he's going to win late every time,
yeah, he'll play LeBlanc and then have weird runes that, like, he knows all these, you know, he knows runes on LeBlanc for like a bunch of different matchups that cause him to have a lot of pressure and push. And then what he also does is he'll play like fucking Cassante mid and just body you. So, you know, if you're going to try and get cute with like a Nautilus mid or a Gragas mid versus Chovy, I guarantee he's going to come with something fucking weird that you've never played against that is going to get that mid priority. And then it's going to shut you down because Caps and Yike are, you know, Caps is not going to be able to respond to Yike in these situations. Yike will probably overextend and die. And then there you go. There's the game, because once you give Gen.G one of these leads, it's really, really difficult to get them, you know, to keep them down. The way you win against Gen.G is like you basically start stacking early Drakes. You force them at a third or fourth Drake fight, which they often have a gold advantage with because they've been purposefully doing other things on that side of the map. So you hope they don't have too much of an advantage and that you can beat them in a fight and like stack soul. It's real hard to do that, because they will win those fights. But if you can kind of like put all your chips in on a couple really impactful objective fights. And if you win those fights somehow, you can beat them. But that's tough. That's tough to do.
Also, people used to historically, even up to last year, because obviously he had the throwback spring finals where he murked everyone and looked awesome when G2 won. Everyone always wants to do that thing that you could historically say about Caps. In fact, remember the famous 2021 where he just like murked BDD and Gen.G and was going fucking crazy on Silas. You were supposed to always be saying, like I said about Mickey X, bro, this is a different Westerner. This is one that A, the Asians respect, and B, the pop-off can be as good as the Asian player. That Caps hasn't been around for a while now, guys. Do you remember Worlds and MSI? Like, there's a whole bunch of games where you said the same thing. Dude, when you look at that group they had for Worlds last year, you should have been like, hey, Caps has a pop-off. They win these games. What pop-offs? He's just good, or he's just average, you know? If anything, he's become more of a stable player. I even hate the fact, Monty, he's done some Chovy shit himself, where he just opts into, like, supportive matchups. It's like, bro, you're Caps. Like, this is a team with flaws. Broken Blade can be flawed. Yike is a rookie. Sometimes I need you to be the carry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, look, I wouldn't come into MSI thinking that we're going to do super well with Yike and Broken Blade.
I think they're going to try and I think they're going to try and make it work for Yike. I think they're just going to do that delusion. Like, you got to give him confidence shit. They're going to do it, man.
Here's the other thing that G2 absolutely cannot do. You cannot play without teleport in the top lane versus Gen.G. You can't do it. Like, they will cross map you into oblivion if you try that.
Oh, we'll be sad if they lock in the Ghost Flash. The Olaf Ghost Flash or whatever.
Olaf comes out, guys. Like,
exactly.
You will never see them on the same side of the map as Olaf. They will never be there. They will just disappear. Like,
it's why we already discussed this. You know this, Monty. It's the reason why, in a fucked up way, look, if you're Adam, be glad you didn't win that final, because you were going to get absolutely torn apart in this fucking tournament. Like, you absolutely, even Thorin would have like, they wouldn't have had to fight you 1v1. Like you said, exactly.
I could see it working against T1, because T1 like opts into a lot of these skirmishes, and there's definitely like some ego shit going on with Owner and Zayas. Like, sure, if you think there's ego shit going on with Doran and Peanut, no, they just won't fight you. They won't be there. Like, Chovy will just be split pushing on the other side of the map, taking all your towers, and you're gonna be sitting there with your thumb up your butt at Dragon. Like, that's just how it's gonna be. So I think that these strategies are just so unlikely to be successful against Gen.G, because they can adapt their early game in a way that will continuously cause them advantages, and they're going to dodge out. And the reason why we, by the way, I looked this up on Power Spike. Yike is the only player in the entire world out of all the major regions who has played Belveth this year. So the only player in LCK,
that's when they do that thing. You know, when they say, Monty, we've got our own picks. There's a reason they're your own picks. Like, spoiler, if the but here's the thing, Monty. If the LPL doesn't run a jungler that can carry, I think it's overrated. I'm just going to tell you, because they're always on the fucking Nidalee and all that shit, mate. No, the Lily. If they're not on this, there's something suspicious about that, mate.
Look. This is what I love about G2, right? And I think G2 could potentially do well with some of these picks against other teams. Like, I think they have a much better matchup into T1, for example. But it's just Gen.G is going to look at those picks and they're just never going to fight you. Like, they're just never going to give you the fights that you want. And those things are very readable. Also, Poppy was buffed on this patch. Guess what? We've seen a lot of Poppy top lane. Well, who's going to play Poppy? Like, what are Peanut's weaknesses at this point in time? Like, yeah, he wasn't a great Lee Sin player compared. Well, he was at one point in time, but not recently.
Long time ago.
You know, what's the champion pool here? Oh, Vi is first pick. Okay, he's a great Vi player. Can he play? Like, there are also fringe meta picks that you're not going to necessarily ban, or if you do ban them, will give Gen.G a bunch of power picks. So, for example, Gen.G is a great Maokai team. Are you going to ban Maokai right now? Probably not, but can they play it? Yes. Can he play Sejuani really well? Yes. Can he play Poppy really well? Yes. So the thing is that the jungle picks that are not going to be banned are all Peanut specialty picks, right? And, you know, maybe he gets a Viego here or there. He has played Gragas historically very effectively. He has, you know, it's probably one of his most top 10 played champions.
Must be.
I mean, he has a decent amount of games on it, but these are kind of the picks that are coming out right now. And these are all Peanut style picks. We're not seeing like the Lee Sin has kind of died off, right? So, you know, maybe there's maybe Owner will play Kindred or something like that, right? We know Jun plays Kindred. But anyway, this is all to say that, like, I just don't think that, like, Gen.G is also a team unlike any other team that they've had a chance to practice in that they do weird shit. Like, yeah, Golden Guardians flexes K'Sante to mid because they learned that from Gen.G, just like Niski learned Gragas from Faker and T1, Gragas mid. And so they're all copying these teams. But the original version of a lot of these rosters is crazy good at some of these picks. Like, you do not want to face Chovy's K'Sante. Like, that is miserable.
The thing as well to me is you can't do what we just did and take all these like elite Asian players and go, but it's his first Worlds or MSI, so he might choke, and then go, but I'll just say nothing about Yike. Hope he does well. Like, same shit. So he can make a choke.
Especially because the burden is on Yike to perform because of the way that his team plays around him. Right?
Oh, and spoiler, I can tell you right now, even if Caps shit the bed, they're going to blame Yike. Do you know how fans work? I know you haven't experienced this, boys, because G2 was winning all the time. G2 fans are going to be just as obnoxious as Fnatic fans. Get ready. And they will pick players to blame so they don't have to blame their favourite players. That is what those fucking fan bases do. Then I'll chuck in another angle. It's like you said, Monty. It's not just that that's the meta of jungle. Dude, another thing I think separates, you know, in the same way as like the LPL in Italy was always a 10 times better than like the fucking Western Italy, or the Jace top lane was a million times better than the NA Jace. The another one right there, mate, is fucking Jungle Vi. The Asian players understand which target to pick. Dude, the Western ones sometimes look like they're in solo queue and they just randomly go in on a guy. It's like, that's not the guy to go in. You only can do one target, motherfucker. Like, why are you picking him? So the other thing is, if someone like Peanut has it, they're surgical with that shit, mate. They know which angle they're going in on. Like that, like you say, his champion picks are not only his specialties, they are also the strongest picks. What more do you want? That's the dream, is to have Peanut and Chovy in a prime position. It's going to be awesome in that sense. Yeah,
it also limits the potential downside that Chovy can have. But yeah, Poppy buffs, even though they're not significant, you know, Poppy is always viable in professional play for the following reason. If you can get her through a laning phase in top lane, or you can have a decent jungle clear, because the thing about Poppy is she stops the a million dashes that are in this game right now. But most importantly is that when you want to fight an objective, you can instantly make it a 5v4, or a 5v3 or whatever. You can get rid of their carry. You can get rid of their front line. And so you always have this advantage. And like, it's very difficult to play against Poppy because you either have to dodge it, which is difficult when you're dancing around and clustering up around a Baron or a Dragon, or you have to get really creative and use like Ornn's unstoppable dash or K'Sante's unstoppable dash at the exact right timing to like kind of like block it, right? Or buffer an ability that locks you to your opponent. So it can be really tough. It can be really tough to get rid of that. So Poppy's really good.
Right, so let's go to the last matchup, which we've intentionally left till the end because, spoiler, this will not only be this could even be 3-0, just obviously, because where the fuck do you find an advantage? Like, I'll just start with the weekend. Everyone's doing that thing. There must just be something in the fucking water about NA LCS top laners. I know that seeing the odd throwback game from Licorice, oh my God, I loved that guy in 2020 spring or 29. I used to love Licorice, right? Spoiler, he didn't even survive through whole series sometimes in that sense. Like, y'all were going crazy after that one BLG, and then right after, back to the dumpster. Like, the universe where you think Licorice can hold up against 369, not on your fucking Nelly, as we say in the UK. That one is a mad mismatch already. Like, in lane, in fucking team fight, that's not happening right there already.
So I do want to give credit to Licorice that he has been significantly better in LCS playoffs. But the reason why, like, he doesn't have to be super good, because this team was winning even when he was super bad. You know what I mean? Like, the amount of carry that was coming out of River, Gory, and Stixay in some of those domestic games during the regular season where Licorice was complete shit. And they were still winning, right? So now that he has gotten better, legitimately, and he had a very good performance on Cassante in game 2 at Billy. He's the reason why they were able to come back in that game. Legit, very good. And I'm glad to see it. As you say, Thorin, Bin has been inconsistent. 369 has been a pillar of consistency this year in China.
I mean, I said earlier, by the way, he is the all-pro top laner. First team.
People will meme if you haven't seen him in a while and you only see his international performance, like, oh, the jokes like, will he roll a 3, 6, or a 9? It's been like all 6s and 9s this year, guys. Yes. He has been real consistent. His Gragas is the best top lane Gragas in the world, probably. He is immensely good at this pick. And he does his job really effectively on the team. He's such a good tank player. He's such a selfless team player in so many ways. This guy is on another level compared to Bin right now, who maybe potentially, I'm not even going to say has a higher upside, but at least has much higher variance, at least at this tournament. And I'm not expecting that out of Bin, because we haven't seen that from, or 369, because we haven't seen that from 369 this year. He's just been fucking good. Now, the argument you could potentially make here is that maybe River and Gory, because Kanavi has probably been the overall worst player on this roster, that maybe that you can take advantage of some of Kanavi's brain farts that he's had in JDG's losses and kind of run with that with a strong 2v2 in the mid lane. But that seems unlikely. And I think the biggest problem here, Thorin, is that we saw what Elkin On did to Stixay and Huhi in the bot lane. If you have that performance against Ruler and Missing, you will not win.
JDG is going to murder the bot lane, man. That's not even in question, I think.
If you give Ruler and Missing the kind of leads that Elkin had with the rest of the team's coordination, the game will be over in sub 20 minutes. We have literally seen this. Like, JDG has done this in the LPL. They will end the game at, like, around 20 minutes against very good teams. It's really hard to stop the JDG snowball if you get it going. And if you are actively inting like they were in every single game basically of the series versus Billy, there is no chance you beat JDG. None. That's it. The game is over. They snowball better than almost any other team in the world.
Also, you made the case there as a jungle mid duo, right? Mid lane, again, if you are actually excited that Gory is going to beat Knight 3 out of 5 games in a best of 5, again, tell me what flavor Kool-Aid. It sounds fucking amazing. It must be some brand new one. Like, was it Baja Blast or some shit? Fucking hell, give me a break. Like, it's outrageous at this point in time. So I don't get it, because if you don't know, Knight is unbelievably good. Like, the joke is, the reason why Knight in a fucked up way gets all that criticism at some of the worlds is because he is genuinely, if you look at his skill set, like someone who could like be the best player ever in League of Legends. Like, I know. He's so talented. It's unbelievable, guys.
And where are you going with this? Like, if the problem with Knight too is that you have to ban Syndra, which is not a meta pick, but if you let Knight have Syndra, he has 100% win rate on this champion this year and a 76% win rate overall. So you can't let him have that. His Ahri is also extremely good. His Jace, even though that has not been a meta pick at this tournament, is very good. His Annie, even though I think he did kind of worse with it in the finals, throughout the season, it was very good.
And by the way, historically, his Silas is god tier, and that's not even really a Gory champion. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so like you say,
Gragas.
Pick your poison now. Just pick your poison. By the way, there's another thing people are forgetting here, Monty. There's still only 5 bans. You've got JD, you've got 369, Knight, and Ruler. Good luck. Which do you want to ban out? Because the other one's getting their picks.
The problem with the way that we've seen Golden Guardians and Mad Lions drafting is that they have been abusing the flexibility of certain picks. They've been abusing the flexibility of Gragas, and they've been abusing the flexibility of Cassante. But they learned these tricks from Asian teams, and it's not like the Asian teams can't also abuse the flexibility of these picks. Like, sure, you can use Gragas. Do you really want to give Gragas to JDG where Knight and 369 can play it? Like, the answer is no. It's much more threatening in their hands than it is in yours. And I really do want to give credit to Golden Guardians, because for me, the biggest point of success on this team has actually been the coaching. I think their drafts have been really good. And I think that they have been immensely dangerous on the red side of the draft because they've been able to really use Gory's flexible champion pool to hide a lot of picks and to get insane value out of our 5 pick. So credit to the coaching staff of Golden Guardians. That is not going to happen against JDG. You cannot lose bot lane like they've been losing and, you know, take a win. Like, that's not possible. Or you can't opt into early skirmishes. If you try and skirmish on the bot side of the map against JDG, you will lose. That is how it goes. So what is the point of winning? Like, maybe you hold Knight down, so then you have to ban a bunch of Knight champions. You can't really ban Ruler out in this meta. He's just fucking good at everything. So I think it's going to be really rough.
I'll also give you the counterpoint, because here's the other thing. Everyone always does this, where they associate the player with their historical team, and therefore you take on the team's strengths and weaknesses. If people don't know, the guy, his alias used to be like Crescent or whatever for Top Esports, who was the coach Knight had for the rest of his career, was infamous for the craziest drafts ever. That even his own team were like, really? Like, that's what we're playing? It's like, yep, that's going out like that. He's not on fucking Top Esports anymore. He's now on JDG, where is the coach. Now listen, one day I'll probably reveal the real... fuck it. I'm not going to do it on this one, but the statute of limitations has ended. I could just fucking say why I despise him as a human being. But I'll tell you what, as a coach, fucking hell, boys. He's in like every LPL final. He goes to Worlds all the time. Like, he definitely knows what he's doing. There's another thing. Knight now has someone who's going to draft properly around him, mate. That was one of the things I always thought was weird about some of the LPL teams. They always came to Worlds with like, this is the meta. And everyone's like, no, it isn't. And it's like, oh shit, no, it isn't. What are we doing? Like, this team's the one I actually think is going to be good. Like, think about it, the JDG teams do make the playoffs at the Worlds, etc. So I don't think there's going to be any problems with the drafting for JD. Like, that's, as you say, one of the edges for Golden Guardians doesn't exist in this series. Now, maybe in the rest of the series. Here's the thing. If you look at the lower bracket, now it could get fun. Maybe then they could do something about Cloud9. Yeah, cool.
And you know, it's the same problem. I didn't talk about this in the Mad Lions G2 series, but it's the same problem for Mad Lions. Like, you aren't going to be able to abuse Gragas Flex against T1. And you know what? I think the biggest stylistic mismatch for Mad Lions is, Thorin, is how did they get through LEC playoffs? Well, you know, they were like taking Ezreal Annie, right? And so what they were doing was they were having Carzzy kind of play one of his signature champions, farm under turret. Hylissang's out there on the map, you know, doing Hylissang things. You know, they were playing Pyke Xayah, like they were enabling Hylissang to roam. Do you know what happens if you do that to T1? T1 is the best team at diving bot in the entire world. Here's what happens. If you pick a losing matchup where you get shoved in, they are in your ass at 4 minutes into the game, killing you under your turret, and you never get any advantages, and you just lose through bot. Like, you have to fight fire with fire versus T1. You cannot have non-pushing matchups against T1 in the bot lane. It's not possible because Owner and Faker will be there with Keria Gumayushi. If you leave Carzzy alone, he will never get farm. He will get dove. You will lose all your turrets. That's it. That's what happens. So it's just a bad stylistic matchup. You fundamentally cannot rely on the flex picks that have gotten Golden Guardians and Mad Lions good draft advantages, credit to their coaches. You cannot rely on the styles that have gotten you there, because Hylissang roaming or you trying to, you know, gracefully lose under turret doesn't work because T1 will press that advantage harder than anybody. And if you're Mad Lions, your star player for the playoffs was Chasey. He was the best player on your team. He gapped people in the playoffs. And is that going to happen versus Zayas? The answer is no. No, it's not.
Especially not at this point of the tournament, you know. Like for me, half of the Zay's problems is it's the final, and it's not really. He's one of those ones where it's like we have this in CS:GO with Heroic. They beat themselves. It's not even a fucking opponent, is it? Like he's lost to people like underperforming Bame and fucking King, and I still don't even know how that's possible. Every time I say it in my brain, I think like I've entered an alternate universe, like the Mandela effect. Wait a minute, King won that one. Not in my world, you know. I thought T1 won that one. No, I can't handle it. I can't handle it.
Yeah, so I don't know, man. Like it feels really bad to talk about some of these matchups because like I said, in some ways I wish we had seen, you know, Mad Lions versus Gen.G and G2 versus T1 because I think stylistically maybe there's a better shot for the Western teams in those matchups. But the matchups we got are just really brutal. Like Mad Lions is like the worst version of T1 in mid lane and top lane. And then they play a weird jungle style with roaming Hylissang. So unless Hylissang has like a god tier performance on the map where he's killing Faker and Zayas constantly and putting them behind, I just don't see how they do it.
Right, we're going to do some viewer questions now. Of course, in case you're unaware, when we say viewer questions, we mean from our viewers, but via our Discord. So go to the Last Free Nation Discord. And what happens is if you pay for it, a subscription there, which is a great way to support us, it gives us a better share of the revenue. Then you can ask a question in the channel for Summoning Insight, and Monte just reads through them, takes them out. And usually, for some reason, here's the thing, Monte, I think actually before ChatGPT, someone figured out to use Monte like that, because there's someone who just asks questions that are in like year one of English literature and language. Like they're like, Monte, how would a good story be constructed if it was in the style of a Shakespearean play? I know they do. It's mental. They just the questions, the prompts are ridiculous, guys. But come on, hit us with some questions.
Yeah. I don't know what to think about this one. What do you think of fist bumps replacing handshakes after games? More hygienic. I mean, it's whatever. It's whatever. I don't see the thing about fist bumps is why I hate fist bumps generally, but when I'm at events, I like to fist bump the hands because like shaking the hands of 100 people is guaranteed to get me sick. So I just prefer fist bumps in that capacity. I think whatever, handshakes are more respectful and
it's Anglo culture, isn't it? Yeah, exactly. Here's the problem I have is only do any of these after a big match, like someone's eliminated. You shake their hand or whatever to, you know, you respect you as a competitor. Good game. Thank you for the match.
In Asian culture, the bowing I like, obviously.
But here's the problem, Monte. I fucking despise NBA culture where every single free throw, you must all fist bump. Even if you miss. And in Counter-Strike, it got really bad, mate. After every round, they all do it. And there's people making people be hanging. Like, I'd be letting you hang. It's like, I'm not going to do it every fucking round of my whole life. Like, I can't handle it, mate. So I already think they do it too much anyway. So just put a neither. I'll go for neither. How about that? Is that an option?
Sure. What's the craziest monkey paw predictions you had in esports? For example, 2 weeks ago, you correctly predicted that Mad would win 0 games in play-ins at MSI. That's pretty funny. That's a pretty funny question.
Pretty funny.
Good job,
yeah.
MC Lazarus. I don't know. I mean, obviously, like DRX winning Worlds after we predicted they wouldn't even make Worlds was pretty hilarious. But also, you know, you have to have bad predictions in order for really amazing things to have happened. That just goes to show how unlikely it was. So I'm never mad about any of these kind of monkey paw predictions. I was quite delighted that DRX won Worlds, for example.
I mean, I'll give you one, just 'cause it's sort of like a good one historically, right? Because I watched the LPL, especially back in the day, because one of my favorite players early on was Wei Zhao. I was obsessed with the LPL when it first began in like 2013, etc. If people don't know, famously, as Kelsey tried to tell the world, Name was better than Uzi. So, mate, if you'd have told me, I don't know if I ever said this, but like, I not only thought he's the best in the world, but if you'd have told me he plays Uzi in the quarters of the next Worlds, I'd be like, oh boy. Oh boy. And he did play him, just lost, didn't he? So, and it ruined his whole career, and he basically doesn't exist now. So cool. That's the ultimate one right there. That's a pretty bad one right there.
In Counter-Strike, the status quo is having one player be the IGL and less focused on carrying the game. Do you have any insight into a similar meta that has developed in top LoL teams and how they structure their in-game decision-making, or does it vary by team? It varies by team, but obviously, like, the support role generally has the support and jungle roles, because, you know, jungle is PvEing and support is roaming on the map, generally have a larger say in the early game. And then it can depend by team as to who has the largest voice when it comes to kind of mid and late game decision-making. Yeah, so I guess it just depends on the team and who we know is vocal. Like, obviously, like, we know Faker is a major part of T1's comms, whereas it's like Peanut on Gen.G.
The problem is there are set roles in League of Legends. There aren't in CSGO. Like, obviously, in theory, anyone could be the Agile. Anyone could be any player in the team. So you more strictly define them in that sense. And then secondly, the reason why people think that Kelsey was right all those years ago, there is no such thing as a shot call. There are, just there isn't only one voice like a god emperor.
One.
Here's the problem. In League, one thing that finally people learned, which I'm glad, is when someone who's in a carry role is mega fed, they should probably direct some of what they do. Like, they should choose if they group if they're ADC. They should say if they side lane, if they're mid lane. That's just natural. Better, right? Yeah, exactly. Whereas the problem is the support couldn't be in a different lane telling the mid to fucking farm the side wave. That wouldn't really work, would it? Like, he wouldn't know the timing, would he?
like a top laner might not know at what point a super fed Ahri can one-shot an AD carry in that state. That's something that only the mid laner is going to know, because they're going to say, like, I'm X far ahead. I'm looking at the game state from my experience. Like, I can kill this player very easily based on his game state. So it does require input from all of the players, right, in order to make it happen. So everybody is talking in a good team. But I think a lot of the decision making, like a lot of that information that is given by players, is then processed by the shot caller of that team to decide what they're going to do.
Has everyone got their bingo card ready? Because I'm about to explain why Upset is better than Reckless on a show when neither Upset or Reckless are playing right now. There you go. That's at least two things I've done there. Like, irrelevant Reckless to Reckless. It doesn't even matter. And Upset is better than Reckless. So you got two of them already. And if you got the free space, you're so close to getting that bingo, aren't you? So what I'll say is this. One of the reasons why, and that's another major thing I am critical of Reckless in his career, is Reckless will tell you this himself. He's a diva, but as a person in the game, he's not actually a pure diva. Like, he will let himself be carried, by the way. If he has caps or expect, he'll let them carry him if it's the right game. The difference I've always thought, and what I love about Upset, is even though Vitality, I actually think this is part of why they lost, by the way, is they went away from this. Upset does that thing. He definitely did it in the old Fnatic, where he will just basically sort of say, like, I'm taking the reins of this game. Like, I'm fed. I've got my champion. Maybe the other two lanes are having problems, like Humanoid and fucking Wonder. I'm just taking over this game. Like, we're playing now this way. We're not going to this dragon. We're going. I love that, mate. I want the people who are strong players who are fed to do that. I think, like you were saying, I think it's ultimately like the top tier way to play the game. Because as you say, Upset will know based on his items and the opponent's items in this team fight if he can go in and kill 3 people, or he'll know if this is a waste of time. There's no point even going to this dragon. We can't push him off. So I think that there's not many players do it that much in the West, unfortunately. But there's a few. There's a few that are good at it.
Okay, next. The mid laner who aided Bo in accomplishing the insane undefeated streak in LPL was none other than Doinb. How well would Vitality do in the LEC with Doinb instead of Perkz? I mean, I think Perkz is a pretty selfless mid laner, all things considered. Doinb not only speaks fluent Korean and Chinese, but also excels in setting up for his jungler and has a proven track record of gluing dysfunctional teams together. If this team clicks, how far do you think they go internationally?
By the way, just as an aside, I mean, if I had to pick top 5 players from the LPL, I would love to see go to the West, to LCS or LEC. Doinb would easily be on that list.
He's
mega entertaining. His style is crazy. And like you're saying, dude, imagine what he might do if he had a bunch of fucking weird-ass players from the West. Here's what you do, right? Give Doinb people like this, Monty. Give him, like, bwipo or, like, Blaber. Mate, he's going to have a really fucking fun approach to what he does with it. I would love that if he went to a Western team.
Yeah, it would be fun. I mean, Niski could also serve a similar role if he were to move on to Vitality, right? And that might be a better position to be in. I think one of the things about... It's hard because, like, Perkz' versatility in some ways, as we've discussed, is hurting. Like, all of Vitality's versatility is hurting them because, for example, when Perkz plays things like Aurelion Sol, Perkz is a good Aurelion Sol player. Aurelion Sol can be strong, but it has no mid pressure. It has like negative mid pressure. And so can Bo be as active on the map? It forces Bo to play a more reactive play style. And so they just haven't had the synergy yet because in some ways their players are too versatile and they haven't laid the foundation of how they're going to play the game. So they just try new styles constantly. So I think that's the issue. I'm not sure if Doinb would fix that.
Also, let's be fair. I have forgotten one factor that when I say now does suck a lot of the hype out of this. He wouldn't be speaking Korean or Chinese, would he? So, yeah. Like, he can speak English, but I don't know that it would be the same shot calling, if you know what I mean. Like, as far as I know, Doinb is one of those people who can like fluently speak Chinese and like is done as much as you can. It's incredibly hard language. Like, as far as I know, I mean, he's going to live there for a long time. He's a wife. So I just don't think. I think essentially he'd be like. Maybe it'd be like 15% worse, 20% worse, maybe if you had to do it in English, because even an extra second, that can throw you off. And I'll just throw this in there. Another reason that's underrated when European teams all communicate in English is, bro, you've heard him when he comes on the shows. You know when Forgiven used to come on the show? Boy, he speaks fluent English. I was his friend for years. I could barely understand what he was saying sometimes. That accent is crazy thick. Imagine being on a team, Doinb. You speak English, but your top lane is French. Your fucking AD carries Comp, who's Greek. You've got Hillesang, who's Bulgarian. Then you've got a Spanish guy in the fucking joint. What are you going to do then, mate? Like, they're all speaking English, but it's really hard to understand. So those shot calls won't be as fluid, is the point. Anyway, next question.
Yeah. Two-part question. What is the Yuumi of other esports? Do those things ruin their game more than Yuumi does in League?
Right, first I've got a joke, because in Counter-Strike, Monty knows from Flashpoint, there is a Yuumi.
Oh.
His talent.
Oh, yes.
His name is Yuumi. Whatever, it's real.
That's funny.
But here's the thing. I don't know that there are, because the problem is, like, there is in the sense, like, if you do, like, the Infested in Brood War.
That's exactly what I was
You can do
say.
those ones, but aside from, like even in Counter-Strike, mate, if a gun's OP, you have to still be good. It doesn't just all win. You don't just do nothing and get your headshot, do you? Like, it still have to be good.
Yeah.
The Infested is probably the best example, right?
Yeah, the Infestor meta that happened in StarCraft 2 was pretty horrible.
I always say this example because it's the best way to explain it, because this is what made me realize it was OP, was when someone pointed out that there was once a time in the meta when it was never incorrect to build an Infestor if you could. Meanwhile, if you, for example, were a Protoss player, if you have too many High Templars, you fuck up if they tech switch and you get the wrong fight. Like, if it's not ever wrong to do it, that's a bit like Yuumi, where it's like, it's brain dead, anyone can play it, you can sort of hands off the keyboard, and it just makes all the shit OP. Like, I will say Yuumi is one of the absolute worst, but the Infestor was up there. The
Infestor Swarm Host meta was really fucking horrible.
I'll tell you an underrated aspect people don't know from StarCraft 2. Stefano was one of the guys who unleashed that meta. But even he, because he's actually a cool guy and did live his life like a movie, would intentionally sometimes not play it because he wanted to not seem like he was winning cheap. By the way, even though that's whack as to try and win as much, that's quite cool. If that's a movie, that's a fucking baller angle. That's cool as fuck, isn't it? That's cool as fuck.
So yeah, I mean, I think the Swarm Host Infestor meta, but the thing about StarCraft, when the question is, do those things ruin the game? You can't ban things. You can always ban Yuumi. You know what I mean? You can always ban Yuumi.
And there's 5 bans now. The real question is, what if Yuumi had been in season 5? Mate.
Well, she's always banned in the first rotation anyway, right? But you know, it would leave less versatility for bans.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like a perma lock. Like one side would just have an advantage, wouldn't they?
You know, if you're playing a Zerg player, you couldn't ban Swarm Hosts or Infestors.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty shit.
By the way, that's actually one thing that I love. Sure, you ban the maps in CS, but what I love is that you can't actually affect what the players do. You can't just ban the AWP from simple, like, go there, mate, play naked. He just has the AWP every time he wants it, doesn't he?
The famous thing in Overwatch 2 would be the GOATS meta, which was enabled by like Death Ball healing over time and shielding.
And like Zarya and shit,
like heroes. Yeah, the Zarya Brigitte stuff, which was a high-level strategy and was difficult to execute, but it wasn't great for viewers.
Yes.
Let's put it that way.
It's just that it ruined the meta, like the diversity of the meta went to shit, didn't it? Everyone just had to play those same picks, basically.
Yeah. And then you knew who was going to win because you knew which teams were just better at that meta, and there wasn't a counter that people were willing to try.
It's why there's a famous episode of Oversight, which was the show me and Monty did. Yeah, you guys don't even know we kept doing shows while he was in Overwatch, but we did a whole show like Summoning Insight in Overwatch.
On this channel.
And if you go and watch the episode with Flames, where it was about fucking Houston Outlaws, where it's just like the entire session's like a 2-hour intervention of us, like, but you must actually try and play the GOATs well. Like, whatever it was, like that whole thing. I can't remember what it was, or DPS.
It was,
the other way around.
The problem
was it played DPS or something?
Yeah, the problem was that they were just bad at it, and they kept trying to do it. So, like, why did they keep trying to do it? Because they were basically guaranteed to lose by
I think they were supposed to play the triple DPS because that was like their outside chance to win, wasn't it? Yeah, something like that. That's like a classic example of like we were trying to get them over the line, but they wouldn't go. They wouldn't budge.
And it turned out they did very badly.
Yeah, exactly. We were right as well. We were bang on right.
What is the saddest you've been as a sports fan, excluding Super Bowl 48? Well, that was the saddest I've been. So
I can tell you.
Why are you excluding Super Bowl 48?
Because he just thinks that's obvious. I mean, it kind of is, isn't it? The problem is, if you actually knew that I got back into watching soccer/European football in the last couple of years, it's actually an easy answer. Last season, Monty, my team, Liverpool, my boyhood team, had a chance to win the quadruple: the Champions League, the Premier League, the FA Cup, and the League Cup. No one has ever done that ever in history, Monty. And the worst thing is, they were in all 4 final scenarios. They lost the Premier League on the final day by a goal. And in the Champions League, they were owning the first half and then just lost the second half. So they went from potentially winning the historic quadruple to only winning the 2 smaller titles out of the 4. And if you know anything about their team, because they're not the team with like the most money and who have always the best, that was it. You're never going to get that chance ever again in your entire life. So that's a bit of a bummer when that, essentially that day after the Champions League, I was sort of like, right, maybe I should just quit football again. See you in another 20 years. No, whatever. It's not like I never watched it, but that's a fucking bummer.
All right.
Can't get that back.
Yeah, I will answer the question because I can't answer Super Bowl 48. I will say the divisional playoffs between the Baltimore Ravens and the Denver Broncos in 2012. So it was the year before.
One of the most bullshit matches of all time.
which
and a Hail Mary for fuck's sake.
The Hail Mary with like
gross,
30 seconds left in the game that ended up like anyway.
And that defensive player who just fucked up the whole game. I can't remember who it was who did that. Like he just let someone through like for no reason for a massive. Oh, that game was gross.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, and it went into overtime as well. It was a double overtime game, and the Broncos lost. And then what happened was the Ravens won the Super Bowl. And this was like the Broncos, 2012 and 2013 were the years where they had like the god tier offense.
Yeah, amazing.
And so it was really fucking sad because like watching the Ravens then go to win the Super Bowl when like there's a world where the Broncos win 3 Super Bowls during the Peyton Manning era. And they fucked up that one. They fucked up Super Bowl 48. And the hilarious irony is that it wasn't even Peyton Manning that won them Super Bowl 50. It was Von Miller. Peyton Manning was garbage that season. He was a walking corpse that was carried by a legendary all-time great defense.
I'll give you one NFL one, though. The one NFL one has to be, for me, because I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan, it has to be that conference game against the Bucs a couple of years ago when on 4th down, they just fucking punted it. You actually have what I think is like skill-wise the best quarterback ever. And you're not like in your half or something. You just go for it. Because here's what kills me about that. The Matt LaFleur guy's just a young coach, so he's trying to like show respect to the history of the game. Dude, if you had Andy Reid there, I can tell you already, I've seen it in Kansas City a million times. He's just putting the ball in Mahomes' hands every time. He's got some
wacky ass play too.
So the reason why that sucked is because essentially you were like, well, one last crack, and they were like, nah, no more chances. Because I've told you, that's one thing I despise about the NFL is the coaches who are still in the old mentality where it's like, just hope you get a magical defensive bunch of stops after giving them the ball. Why? We've got one more chance for the quarterback to win the game. And it's someone, by the way, who's a god at fucking scoring touchdowns. What are you doing? Like, that was a bummer. That moment when I realized the game's over. Because, by the way, what people forget is this, Monty. Because the play before that was the one where he didn't run and he could have got more yards. That game had gotten really exciting. They'd gotten like a touchdown to get back into it. It was going to get really, and then that just sucked the whole air out of the fucking game and it was over. And spoiler, if you know the Green Bay Packers, they were never going back. Where they're like, who gives a shit? That was the one chance and we blew it, so it's over. At least that's now, right. Here's the thing. I will say this. The one thing that's changed about me is this, Monty. I still love fucking Aaron Rodgers as a player. I think he's so amazing. And I do think his teams often were shit and didn't have help. But after seeing the way he dicked around back and forwards these last 3 or 4 seasons, then he literally, like in a cocky way, said stupid shit like, I won't be going to the Niners or the Raiders. Bro, their teams are actually good. And the Cowboys have an amazing squad. Like instead you go to the Jets, and then he brought all the same fucking wide receivers from Green Bay. Like, all
right. So the Jets had a good roster outside of quarterback last year. We'll see what he can do. We'll see what he can do in the Jets.
No, but my point is that you're supposed to do the Tom Brady and just get the ultra loaded team and just win the next Super Bowl, aren't you? Like that, you just go to the Niners, don't you? Come on,
it would have been nice for him to go to the Niners.
Be baller. I think he just did it because of that famous thing where it's like you salty that all those teams passed him or whatever the fuck. Miss me with that, bro.
He's very emotional.
He is. Essentially, I hate him as a person and I love him as a player because the guy as a person is the one fucking it all up for me.
Right. You know what I'm looking forward to sadistically is obviously the Packers have been so lucky in their quarterbacks.
There's
They've
no
literally
way.
only
I know.
literally only
Yep.
started 2 quarterbacks in the last 30 years, and that was Favre and Rodgers. So like in terms of game 1, like going into the season starting quarterbacks, how lucky do you have to have 30 years of Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, whereas all these other teams have had, like, no joke, sometimes like 15 quarterbacks over that same period. So anyway, the luck
There's no way Jordan Love is going to do it.
There's no way. He's like
he's
the
just bang
third,
average.
He's
Yeah,
the
he's just
third
bang average.
Hall of Fame quarterback that's coming out of this organization. And the thing about the Packers is because they don't have like a rich ownership, they don't have a lot of the options when it comes to signing players or running the organization that rich owners have. So they're going to be in, I think, without those players, like all-star quarterbacks, Hall of Fame quarterbacks, they're going to be in a lot of trouble as an
Also,
organization.
remember, that was the most egregious part. Right before Rodgers pulled off the 2 MVP back-to-back seasons, you drafted the quarterback. As when Monte says, you're a team that needs draft picks. Take a fucking wide receiver. That could have changed everything. Instead, you gambled for this because you probably thought, well, maybe he moves on anyway. He didn't, and now you just fucking blew it, didn't you? You just blew it now.
Yeah, it's depressing.
Bummer.
How would you explain the success of Counter-Strike esports scene compared to direct competitors FPS such as Team Fortress 2, Halo, Quake, Unreal, Valorant, I guess?
Most of those aren't even vaguely in the same ballpark, by the way.
They're not team-based.
Yeah, like Quake, I mean, that was never really like big since the early 2000s or something. So like, even when it was in IEM, it was the smallest game in the early 2010s. So Quake doesn't count. That's irrelevant. Unreal Tournament hasn't been relevant, no jokes. It's about 2004 something, mate. So I do know why that one's in there. Valorant, I guess, is growing. The main problem I'll say with Valorant is, Monte, did I nail it or did I nail it on Valorant? I told you it would have no effect on CSGO whatsoever.
Yeah.
Like, all it's done is drain some NA talent. That's it. It hasn't taken the viewership, hasn't taken the player base. People still watch CSGO, like all the best players stick. It's ridiculous.
If anything, I would think that, especially with the new version of Counter-Strike coming out, the existence of Valorant, who has prepared a new generation of players, because Valorant's player base is very young, for tactical team-based shooters, they're going to move in. They're going to graduate into Counter-Strike, or at least try out the new game, because now they have, experience within the genre that they wouldn't have had before. I think, if anything, it's going to be a boon to Counter-Strike.
And by the way, I think some of the talent from who are in Valorant now, who were the ex-CSGO ones on the rise, dude, they could come back. Like, Leaf could come back over, fucking Som. These people could come back and be on an NA team and rise up again if their careers just went that way. So it's not impossible. Also, some of the talent comes back, is it? Yep. So I would say Counter-Strike's easily the biggest of all of these ones. Team Fortress 2, again, doesn't even need to be on this list. That was some amateur shit.
Success is this in esports. Counter-Strike's audience, here's the major success. Anybody from any other esport can watch Counter-Strike while knowing nothing about Counter-Strike, because it's based off of real-world analogs for weapons. Like, you don't even have to be a video gamer to understand that a guy getting a 3K with the Deagle against people with AKs is exciting. Like, you just know, because there's no bullshit effects. There's no bullshit spell effects. There's no burden of knowledge. Your burden of knowledge is just shit from the real world already. Like, everybody knows who's alive, like, what these guns are and what they do, and like what a smoke grenade is or a flashbang is. It's super easy to explain. From an audience perspective, the action narrows really obviously. It goes down to a 1v1 or a 2v1. And so the focus, you don't have to tell people where the ball is as you do in other esports. You don't have to know all these characters and abilities, because everybody basically is the same thing. Like, there's some differences between guns on CT versus T, but it's not that big. And in general, like, you can see, oh, this is a sniper gun versus a rifle versus a pistol, and get some vague idea of what's going on. Thirdly, it's a round-based system, so you can do replays and explain things, and there's like a really nice cadence to the action.
That part's really underrated, because like the NFL in that sense, isn't it? It's awesome.
Yeah.
They've been able to have that. Imagine in League if you could pause it and show like it'd be like a proper one with no action and break it. It'd be amazing, wouldn't it?
Right. And it's like, it's not on the gas all the time. So like the hype you feel like kind of ebbs and flows in a really
By the way, I think the round-based part is actually the best part. Like, all those other games you named, that doesn't exist. I mean, except
rounds are huge. It's really easy to understand what the lead is, really easy for people to break it down as a result of the rounds. And I think finally, and this is a crucial part, if I played Counter-Strike 15 years ago, a lot of the maps are still the same, guys. Like, the game really hasn't changed a lot. And it's that eternal nature of it, where you don't always have time. You know, most esports thrive because of a huge player base. But even that player base, like, you know, 1% of League of Legends or 5% of League of Legends players watch esports, a very small percentage. But the thing about Counter-Strike is even if I haven't played a game of Counter-Strike in a decade, I can still watch and appreciate a Counter-Strike game today. So as people move on with their lives and may not be active players, like traditional sports where you might have played that sport in high school or in college, but you're not playing it actively anymore. But the game hasn't changed at such a fundamental level that you can't understand it. If you played League of Legends in 2013 and you stopped for 10 years, you literally couldn't understand the game now. Whereas Counter-Strike, that's just not true. That's not true. So I think it retains legacy viewers who have very fond memories of Counter-Strike, but haven't touched the game in a long time, or are more casual players now who can continue to be engaged in the esports scene. You have any other factors?
I think those are mostly it. Yeah. I mean, I always just describe it like this. Counter-Strike has that ultimate quality that they used to famously say about poker. You know, the reason why televised poker became great is because they said it takes a minute to learn and a lifetime to master. Same concept with Counter-Strike. It can go as deep as you want because of the tactics and the skill, but it can also be very simplistic. Like you're saying, the guy from an MM server, it's vaguely, you can understand what you see and you know what it is. You don't have to have someone explain it all to you.
Yeah. You don't have a bunch of abilities and characters like Team Fortress or Overwatch. It's not, you know, Quake is difficult to
Quake's
appreciate.
there's aspects of Quake that, like, for example, when you're out of control, if you just won't take fights, so you give up item, that's weird to people if they've never seen, like, but why isn't he fighting? Like, there's too many, like, counterintuitive elements, whereas actually Counter-Strike, like I say, it can be very simple.
It's the closest thing to a real sport in terms of its timeless nature, ease of understanding.
It's why I always compare it.
Look, when an amazing play has happened, you know?
I know why tactically you compare it to the NFL, but in terms of actually like that aspect of the game, it's more like the NBA. The NBA is also very simple to enjoy. You can just enjoy dunks and people shooting, or you can understand like defensive rotations. You can understand how they like pick and roll. It's the same thing. It's simple, but it's also very complex and deep, both at the same time.
Whereas most other esports are just very complex. And like, if you don't know,
well, the
League of
saddest
Legends,
is, I'm sure you've done this. I would occasionally tune into the final of like HOTS and be like, I'll give it a go. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I can't even get into this, mate.
Look, I've made a career out of casting MOBAs. I don't understand Dota at all. At all. Like, I don't understand anything about Dota. I find it very confusing.
Yes.
And I'm in the same genre. So it's crazy that I can't understand it at all. Would CSGO esports be more successful if YouTube was the main streaming service instead of Twitch? They all do YouTube streaming as well. Yeah, most of the TOs do YouTube and Twitch simultaneously. They're not exclusive.
If he means if we could like go back in time, and I do think it would have been way better if that had been the biggest one, but that ship sailed because they've tried a few times and they didn't really put the weight behind it enough. And also it was the Twitch, not the thing you give away, but it was the prime of Twitch when it was really growing massive. So it would have been interesting, certainly.
What do you do every day to thank Marc, Merrill, and Brandon Beck for allowing you to make a living off their free game?
Oh, by the way, I'll tell you one thing very quickly. I'll tell you one reason why I would have liked YouTube to be the main one for CSGO. Because, mate, I have 250k subs. I could probably get the core streaming straight off the fucking dome, couldn't I? I'd be Dom in that game. No, let's just not go there. Let's not bring it back down. Bring it back down again. Sorry, I'm just Thorin. I'm not Dom of CSGO.
But, you know, Brandon Beck was never the one who was like a public dick. That was Marc Merrill, who is doing all of this stupid shit publicly. Brandon Beck, in my experience, knowing him, is pretty
He's almost
chill.
never said anything weird publicly.
No, he's like a really chill guy.
Yeah, he was just more, to me, he was one of the guys where it's like, I never really thought he was into the esports side that much. He was just one of the original guys who made the game or whatever, isn't it?
Marc is the one who has the massive, weird ego. And I mean, I think it's ridiculous that they would say that, considering that their company was founded off of like, I think it was like Brandon Beck's family who like supported them with, you know, 7-figure investments to get the game rolling. So they had insane systemic advantages that were given to them by investors that were family members of the pair of them. So I don't know, man, like, good job creating a free-to-play game. That doesn't mean that you are one of the high points of human history or that you have any kind of ethical authority. You made a fucking video game. Like, good work, dude.
So I'm going to say two things. One, you sold out to China, so you can fuck off. Like, that ended. That was ages ago you sold out to China. So I don't know why you're making it sound like you did it all. And then two, I think when they say that to Dom, the reason I love to bring it up is because it shows how utterly fucking clueless they are. In the same way as before LCS franchising, Marc Merrill really believed TSM made so many millions of dollars profit from League of Legends that they were just pissing it away on CSGO. The guy's a moron. So it's the same with content creation. Bro, you know that thing of like, I made this game that you got to have a career in. That career played a part in keeping your fucking game going in a way that Dom being able to have a career didn't. Like, Dom could go to another game. He could go to any game he wants with his personality and his mind for the game. He could go to any esports game. Here's the difference, though. Could you find another Dom if he left League of Legends? Could you? Fuck. There's no one in it that's going to be exactly like that. So I have always thought it's so disrespectful to content create. By the way, it's one of the reasons why the fact that Riot will never acknowledge me and you in a positive way is beyond fucked. Bro, they've both fucked us up the arse, and we're still doing content in their game because we care about the game and we want this fucking scene to be awesome. Like, I think the most underrated, you know that term they have for esports, what, like unsung hero? The unsung hero of League of Legends esports is all the content creators who kept this motherfucker going for 10 plus years. Like, it would, I said this in the past, if it was just a game with no esports scene, I think it would have died before this century. No, not century, like the 2020s, basically, I mean.
Also, I mean, I think what's true is that just because they've been successful in esports, they take it as this was their maximum amount of success that they could have had. I think that they've been successful in spite of a lot of their really terrible decisions around esports.
They should have been the biggest game ever by a million miles.
Yeah, like they've succeeded in spite of themselves a lot of the time.
They've shot themselves in the foot a million times, mate.
Yeah, really terrible management for the most part. Is there any particular ability QWER that you've seen in another game, Dota, Valorant, Overwatch, etc., that you would like to see in League of Legends?
What the fuck is QWER?
So like the like one ability from a different MOBA or Overwatch.
Just say the ability. Well, why say the thing about the keys or whatever? Okay, whatever.
I don't know, whatever.
Okay, so just an ability that you've seen
from another game that you'd like to see in League of Legends.
I mean, the real problem is everything. It ends up OP in League of Legends, doesn't it? So,
yeah, I don't know.
Like, what could there even be? Because remember, like,
I mean, like the Zarya ult in Overwatch was kind of mimicked by the new Aurelion Soul in terms of like a black hole that sucks.
Like,
people
isn't
in.
the fucking Genji Dragon Blade basically Yasuo ult? Like, it sort of is we're being real in it. Like, it's already exists.
Like, it's all like basically they all stole from each other anyway. So
and
you know, and
the
also,
fucking the like chamber guy in Valorant is just a teleport, by the way. You know, like exactly.
The Zarya ult's kind of like a Orianna ult too. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I think they're all the same concepts. I'm trying to think of something unique. Like, what about the Brigitte ultimate? What do you think of that?
It's kind of boring. Like the
Explain
rally
it to
ultimate.
people.
Yeah, basically it like speeds you up and heals you. But I don't know, man. It's like I
don't think I can think of one.
I'll
tell you what is fun. I'll give you one. Here's
everything from each other.
Here's the concept. Like, I'm going to cheat. It's not an ability, Monty. But one thing I always thought was dope as fuck in Dota 2 is the like fucking bounty hunter component where that character just like goes crazy off like getting the money or whatever. That can make for fun games. It's a bit weird, but whatever. It's whatever.
All right. I'll say this. What if LoL had Meepo with like duplicates?
Yeah, wouldn't be terrible, right?
That actually, I would like to see that just because of the micro that would take. Like having a Meepo in League of Legends would be interesting.
Not like a better Wukong, basically.
What are the chances that League will still be a premier esport in China and Korea in 10 years? Pretty good. Yeah. Because remember, Warcraft 3 is still a premier esport in China, and StarCraft Original is still a premier esport in South Korea. So once people tend to attach themselves to these games, the population in China is big enough that it could support even a niche scene pretty well. And Koreans are just like fiercely loyal. And a lot of them, I think we'll see this as time goes on in the West too. But you have to remember, a lot of Koreans like grew up as teenagers watching Brood War, and they're now in their 40s and still watch Brood War, right? They still want to watch it. They still want to watch these players. So
the big dirty secret of StarCraft 2 that I always banged on, and it's actually why they all hate me in StarCraft 2, why all the Westerns like Rhett and Snoot all came out against me in Rotterdam, and all those fucking casters, and even my boy Hook, who wasn't my boy then and called me a cunt. The reason they all came out against me, Monty, is because I was one of those people who always said, not only is this game worse than Brood War, but Korea doesn't give a fuck about it. They had to, but the GSL, Korean never gave a fuck about StarCraft 2. Meanwhile, when StarCraft 2 started to die and they brought back Brood War as an amateur/semi-pro thing, it was popular again. And I already knew this, by the way. This is why I love ignorant Westerners. Do you know why I knew no one cared about StarCraft 2, Monty? I lived in Korea and went to PC bangs. I would be playing League of Legends. Next to me, 3 people would be playing Brood War. A guy is playing FIFA and someone's playing CS Online. Like, it was ridiculous. Or Crossfire or whatever. Like, no one was ever playing StarCraft 2. I don't think I ever saw someone play StarCraft 2 ever in a PC bang. I was there, mate.
Yeah, it was not common.
It was never a big game.
Can you recall when you were most frustrated with an author killing off a pet or child character early in the story as a way to engage the reader or viewer, I guess, or solicit sympathy?
Okay.
Like a cheap trick to solicit sympathy? I mean, I think the obvious answer is John Wick, but John Wick does it really well. You know what I mean? Like, it's the reason why John Wick works is because it's intentionally kind of like ham-fisted and cheesy, but the whole thing is ham-fisted and cheesy, and that's the charm of John Wick as a series.
I mean, the problem here is I'm going to go to the classics. It's one of a million characters we all know, Game of Thrones. The problem is it's almost the gimmick to kill off the characters, isn't it? So in a way, I'm sort of nitpicking because in some ways, some of the best things about Game of Thrones is they can kill any character.
Yes, exactly.
But there are certain ones, like, for example, I know why they did it for the story now because I've seen the greater plot play out. I thought just killing off Khal Drogo like that was fucking whack. That was an awesome character. They just threw him away for what? Because sadly they were building towards ultimate Mary Sue, evil fucking Daenerys Targaryen or whatever. But like, I thought that was you could have done so much more with that character. I thought.
Yeah.
Imagine he came to Westeros with them and like, oh, it'd be fucking amazing, mate.
Recently, bwipo revealed in a co-stream with Dom that during Vitality scrimming, they ganked top lane so much so as Rage smashed his fist, he fractured his hand. There's stories like that are as weird as in other games. So it's not asking about this.
Let me just address that quickly, though. I'm not going to go into a big thing. I'm going to very briefly say, as someone who has done the most good interviews in the history of this fucking field and talked to 1 billion players behind the scenes, one of the most frustrating things about pro players is they have terrible memories. Terrible. And they're mega biased. So even if they're telling the truth, it really is on some postmodern your truth shit. Where, guess what? Adam's truth isn't the same as Upset's truth. And bwipo's truth isn't the same as sOAZ's truth, isn't the same as Youngbuck's truth, isn't the same as Reckless's truth. So the other problem is, people take quotes like that, Monty, and they take it as though it was like primary evidence. That's circumstantial evidence. That's like some shit that will be thrown out in court as hearsay. Like, we don't know that. Like, and they're thinking of shit from years ago. I know in your brain it feels like season 8 was that, mate, season 8 was 5 years ago. You can't expect people to play 1 billion scrims and remember every story. Like, they're going to, over time, stories, I don't know if you've even heard this. People say that when you remember, part of why details changes, you almost like, you don't really remember. Your brain sort of plays the thing back for you and changes details as it goes. So even your memory changes over time. So, yeah, whatever. He means, is there a crazy story like that in any other esport or something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a million. Like, for example, we revealed it on the Crackdown. Jesus came on the Crackdown. You can go look at the episode. In season 7, when Jesus was on Fnatic with Reckless and Caps and sOAZ, think of these names. Reckless used to play from his own room and refused to be with the other 4 players because he thought they were too bad for him to play in the same room as him. That is wiling, homie. That's way worse than sOAZ getting ganked and hitting the table. Like, that's crazy, mate. Unlucky. That's one of the biggest diva things I've ever heard of. Remember, I'm not talking about he was with bombs, Monty. sOAZ and Caps are in that room. Like, brother, you can't be fucking doing this.
Also, I mean, Config very recently in Counter-Strike got in that fight, like broke his leg, which was much more public than this. Like,
oh, God, punchline for you. You won't have heard this because you're from League of Legends. Oh, are you ready? Richard revealed this, but if you know the people we know in the scene, in Counter-Strike, behind the scenes, people talk. We just don't tell the stories unless you're a dickhead. So sorry, Config, you earned this because you claimed you've changed. Are you ready for the punchline, Monty? Even though he was so injured in that scenario, he couldn't even leave Malta at the time. He was told by like, the surgeon, do not fly, like wait. He had to just stay on his own, sort of in his own misery. He even said he would cry all night, even to sleep would be painful. He got kicked from his team. He thought, I might have my whole career over. So he went back to Malta for the next Pro League season. Straight to the same club where he got kicked in the face, massive pints of beer, walking around. That's fucking esports for you. That is esports. They don't learn, mate. They just say sorry, they don't learn. Isn't that just, boo, give one off at least. At least wait for like EPL 18 or something, twat.
In honor of the Durex LPL sponsorship, so Durex Condoms is sponsoring LPL as well as the Chinese broadcasts of MSI and Worlds, as I understand it, which is hilarious and also amazing.
Here's the joke there, though. People have missed this joke. That would have been really on brand about 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's you might
government might even wanted it. Yeah, exactly.
Now, given population concerns. How big of an impact does girlfriend drama have had in the history of LOL esports? Well, we can just do all esports. The answer is massive. Like,
dude, Adam and Upset. That was one that was public. That tore the whole team apart. By the way, if you want another example of the complete lack of self-awareness from pro players, because I said in a tweet, Monte, that Knock was like sort of like being a bit boosted and he should get ready for reality. Adam said, I am a disgusting individual who shouldn't be part of this ecosystem or something mad like that. He is the cunt who, because Upset's wife at the time, demanded he come home because she was having like a mental break, as far as I know, and was in a really bad state. He just like publicly laundered all that stuff and acted like they were just like fucking around for, mate, you're disgusting. So that's like the level of self-awareness of players. But that's also what girlfriend drama can do. By the way, I've told some of these stories before, but I don't mention the names. I'll tell you right now, 2 players in Fnatic fucked the same fangirl and got the same STD. How do you like them apples? How do you like me knowing shit like that? And by the way, the best part is, one day I might reveal it. One of those players I don't even like. But I'm too legit, so when something's a secret, I keep it a secret.
Yeah, there's also just there are a lot of unfortunate examples, and I think what we are respectful because we don't. Oftentimes we know what's going on, and we just say, "Oh, I don't know why this player is playing so badly right now." But there have been a lot of times in my career where there have been some really dark things that have happened. So, for example, when I was in Overwatch, I was highly aware of one player's girlfriend basically like threatening suicide as a way to control this player. And it was really affecting his performance and his ability to practice with the team. And the team was really suffering. And all I could do is sit there and be like, well, I guess they're not as good as they used to be, guys. Like, and so, you don't reveal this stuff, but the answer is like, it has a lot of these personal relationships have had a huge impact on player performance. Like, massive.
I can tell you one that's a classic story because this was actually known as a rumor. I'm not like speaking out of turn here, right? One of the saddest OSL finals ever was the one right near the end where, what's his name? Let me think who it was who was playing in it. A Stork played Fantasy. And at the time, Stork, by the way, an amazing PvT player, Fantasy's a Terran player, and they're also like rivals, was in really great form. It looked like he was going to win this. And that would have been like his second ever, like, one of the Star Leagues, etc. And he would have like put himself in the category he should be with like Flash and J-Dog. And the reason he lost and got 3-0'd is because something mad, like a week before the final, his girlfriend just broke up with him.
Yeah.
And it just crushed him flat. And he just played so shit in the final. And on top of that, this is why I wonder if it was even an open rumor. Fantasy also just did like some cheesy shit as well. Like, so it's like the ultimate way to like, well, because to be fair, if people don't know, they do this in the UFC. If I know you're injured, I'm going to be kicking that leg all day long, mate, of course. I want to win the fight. You fucking to fight. You're trying to knock me out, So yeah, that's just esports, isn't it? And by the way, there's a million more girlfriend dramas that, but just leave it there. Just leave it there.
Who in esports would make the best ASMR content, and why is it Yamato Cannon? He's certainly up there. I would say an all-time great voice in esport was also Rob Simpson, the former StarCraft caster. Incredible voice on that guy.
Technically, about the first 100 Thorin's thoughts are ASMR. I mean, when I moved to Korea, I even had to do that quiet voice. Remember, like, a lot of people are saying that Fnatic in the all-off boost did the wrong thing. And that's why someone did that video recently where if you see the first video of me, you wouldn't even know it's me, mate. I'm just like, my alias is the esports historian because I've covered Quake. But then when you see cuts to like 2020, I'm like, another thing about double lift, the fucking cunt. Like, no, it's ridiculous. Like the glow. But I could go back and do that for sure. Yeah. Just get the old Thorin.
If you had the ability to run back any tournament in LoL history, which one would you pick and why?
Oh, there's a lot we could pick for that. I mean, I might run back last Worlds.
2018 Worlds. 2018 Worlds.
I think last Worlds as well. Dude, I want like Gen.G or T1 to win.
I kind of enjoyed the Cinderella run. I did not enjoy KT losing in the quarters of 2018.
I mean, yeah, what else would I even pick for that? There's a lot of Worlds, to be fair.
I would like to delete Samsung's win also. So
no, I actually did think that one sucked. Yeah. Like, I actually think if you play that tournament again, I actually think RNG would have won that one, which would have been really cool, but didn't happen. Did not happen.
Seeing how the C9 org does so well at picking up new talents and trusting in the process and competes well against Asian teams despite being crippled by being an NA with how small the player base is, how well do you think the org would be if they were to move into the LEC with all the talent in that region?
Just let me address that first part, though, because even though I know what he means, they definitely develop talent, Monty, but they do not trust the process. C9's best quality after the all-NA lineups is kicking people before they drop off. They're actually the best at not trusting the process. Exactly.
Jack knows.
He's
Jack
really
knows
ruthless,
when
isn't he?
About to get washed.
And he's
very
so
good at it.
He's also a genius at just before.
And then he sells them.
It's like Belichick. Just before they fall off, he tricks someone else. Like, you look, I wish I didn't have to bloody give you licorice, but I guess you'll have to take him, won't you? Like, I won't tell you which team, but one time Jack was just telling me like a plan he had in the off season for a certain other big team that would be funny if they got the bottom player, and he got them like this close to biting, and those players did just drop off like a motherfucker. So he almost completely sabotaged like a rival, but they didn't bite on it, sadly. Yeah. But I remember one of those where I was like, "Oh, you are just devious as fuck, mate."
Yeah, so Jack is just really good at managing players, and because he's always around. You have to remember that he is constantly around the team, so he's gotten really savvy at like knowing when something's not working and then immediately jettisoning it before.
I'm just going to say this, guys. You can't say after spring last year that he trusts the process. He fired LS 4 games in, and then he was like MVP of the league. Get the fuck out! Like, you know what I mean? Like, come on, boys. He doesn't trust the process. I know what you mean, though. But by the way, that would be the team I'd want to move to LEC, of course. It'd be awesome.
And also, we know what the C9 org has done in other things. They won the first season of Overwatch League through very aggressive like roster moves as well within that season. And so I think C9 could do very well in international leagues if they had access to more talent.
For sure.
How do you show/convince someone that it's bad fiction/writing? I assume you may have tried this on Doa. It was at least successful once or twice.
I'll tell you something though, Monty. That's, unless I'm mistaken, you know him better than me. That's actually one area I think Doa's very maligned. Everyone goes like, Doa's just an idiot Star Wars fan. No, Doa will tell you which of the Star Wars do suck or which are overrated. Now he'll say, I love Star Wars, so I'm biased, but actually he's pretty cool at like giving it up when
no.
He'll tell you when it's a guilty pleasure, of course.
Doa hated the most recent like Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
So I guess like, but sometimes it is success. Like also Doa likes to be contrarian at some points in time. And like, we do it for entertainment as well. When you guys are listening or like to entertain ourselves, which is like, we like to have the banter, and he like, you can get him to basically be like, oh yeah, you're right, man. I was just, you know, it's like, I was trying to defend this thing because I love it, but you're right.
I know what the guy means as an actual exercise. How do you convince someone? But I'll just tell you, I don't do that, and I will never do that. Here's why. I remember hearing this quote, and it actually was an epiphany when I heard it, where they said, bees don't waste their time trying to convince flies that honey's better than shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. Enough said. I wouldn't waste my time trying to if they think it's good right now, I think it's bad. You have at it.
There's a similar William Blake quote, which is, I think it's the eagle never lost so much time as the eagle never lost so much time as when he submitted to learn of the crow is what the William Blake quote is. But yeah, I think when it comes to bad writing, it's really just like, is this a stereotypical trope? Are there Deus Ex Machinas that don't make sense within the context of the work? Is character development actually happening? Do character actions line up and make sense with what we know of the characters, which is honestly one of the biggest sins? Are the characters unique and interesting and well developed as opposed to being like stock stereotypes, etc.? The thing is that it's also just a part of being young or not well read or experienced in art and literature, is the first time you see one of these characters, there's a reason why characters are successful time and time again throughout the entirety of human history, like the playful trickster character or the thief with a heart of gold, or like, you know, the young protagonist learning how to be a hero. Like we see these things time and time again. It's just in the nuance of how they're performed. And the first time you see one of these characters, you're going to think that's really cool. But by the time you've engaged with art for a long period of time, you're going to be like, oh, it's this thing again. Is this one interesting or unique in some way? Is it interacting with other characters differently? Is this plot device interesting? That's why, guys, I never care about spoilers in fiction. You can spoil shit for me forever because it never matters what happens. It only matters how and why it happens. And I can enjoy being in the moment of a movie or a book and knowing that the spoiler is coming. First off, because I have an insane suspension of disbelief where I won't even remember it while I'm watching the movie. But secondly, because like knowing a character dies doesn't affect my enjoyment at all because it only matters the context in which that character dies and how I feel as a result of that context, which can't be spoiled. So spoilers are irrelevant.
The problem I have with this topic is 99% of people who say, this is great writing, mean I liked the story, as in the plot, and what happened to the characters I liked. It's why everyone thinks animes were great. No, you just like that character or theme. The actual writing and production is often shit. Because I'll say this, I'll hurt everyone's feelings here, because I know everyone loves this shit out of this guy in League of Legends, cause of fucking Travi Gum Gum. I haven't read loads of his material, but everyone kept fucking recommending those Brian Sanderson books, right? Yep. This guy is about the most formulaic fucking writer I have ever seen, bro. Like, he's not terrible, but he's not some great genius writer. Like, he's mega formulaic. He's almost, his own books are like Mad Libs of his old books, as far as I can tell. Like, what? I don't get what you're all loving about it. It's okay. I don't get it. I do not get it.
You can't have that level of output of writing
course.
And have it all be incredibly well constructed. Like, it's the same shit. Look, here's an example. I'm named MonteCristo after a Dumas novel. Like, I think Alexandre Dumas is a highly entertaining writer, but basically it was Pulp Fiction of the day, where the Count of MonteCristo was coming out every week in different magazines and newspapers. It wasn't a book, right? And so, Charles Dickens was exactly the same way. He was just the British version of this, who was spinning out what was effectively a soap opera, right? Within the period of the day. It was popular fiction.
I'll give you the best example, in my opinion. My favorite series is obviously Dune. The 6 Dune books took 20 years to be published.
And he didn't even finish them.
He didn't even do the 7th one, yeah. 20 years.
It's not like a George R.R. Martin where it took 20 years because he's just not writing it for part of those years.
He's probably planning it all. Yeah, it's mega in-depth.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, people will make arguments like, what about Proust? And like all this stuff. Like, there are exceptions. I just don't think that Brandon Sanderson is the Proust of our generation.
Unless you ask Travis Cross.
Yeah. I know it's a hot take that Brandon Sanderson is not the Proust of the 21st century, but there you go.
Which again, we're asking about good writing. Enjoy the books if you enjoy them. We're talking about writing ability. Look, it's the same thing, by the way. Spoiler, I've said this a million times.
I just don't think Dumas is the greatest author of all time.
It's the same exact shit I've told you all a million times with broadcast talent. If you haven't worked as broadcast talent, you do not even know what they are doing. You think because the guy talks fast, he's brilliant. He isn't. You think because the guy has slogans, he's brilliant. He might not be. Like, you just like them as a personality. You like their voice. That's it. That's cool, by the way. That's all you need to know. But you are not actually equipped to do a technical breakdown of their casting or analysis,
Yeah. I just finished Children of Dune for the first time. Have either of you read it? And if so, what are some of your spoiler-free thoughts?
Would you recommend? A real question. I recommended Goddamn of Dune and the whole Dune series about 100 times.
Wait for the next question. Would you recommend I continue to God Emperor? Yes, God Emperor is the best book in the series.
What? Fuck yeah. Since you're actually asking that question in a certain manner, I would actually pay to have your memories deleted and only read the first Dune and then watch the movie and say it's better than the book. There you go. See ya.
No. Anyway, yes, do definitely read God Emperor of Dune.
Read them all. Read them all. Here's what people don't know. The 5th and the 6th book completely changed the whole theme and like the angle and which perspective it's from and give you a totally different sense of the universe. So they're actually all really compelling books. It's just the 5th and 6th aren't like a pure story carry on of the same characters, as it were, And spoiler, I'll actually give you a tiny spoiler here, Monty. Do you know the area they have fucked up the most with the Dune movie? By casting Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho. Without giving too big spoilers, Duncan Idaho is one of the only characters in all the books, and he has to have radical transformations, and he is a character that has a lot of dialogue. You have fucked that one, so that just means you can't continue all 6 books, because it won't work. It won't work, mate. Jason Momoa is the strong, silent fucking guy. That's his whole casting role.
Yeah, I mean, they also kind of did the relationship between him and Paul dirty by like not having it really exist. Like part of You know, part of this, like, I like certain aspects of the Dune movie. I love it visually. I think they nailed the atmosphere. But the problem is that there's so much character development that goes on between Paul and Duncan Idaho within the first book of Dune that just doesn't happen, that you just can't have the resonance with this character and what happens later on. So that's a pretty big problem. That's a pretty big problem. Like, you just know that the emotional impact is just not going to be there because the dialogue isn't there that exists in the book. What would be one rule you would change about how any sport or esport game is played to make you want to watch it regularly, like you do UFC, NFL, and League/CS:GO? So I guess one that we don't watch, a sport or esport. I don't know. I would make soccer a full contact sport.
So does it have to be a sport, not an esport?
Or esport. It could be anything. It's either. I would make, so there's a couple things with soccer that would make me consider watching it. One of them is to go down to like 8 players per team so that you would have more scoring and more opportunities for star players to shine. That would be, I think, a very important one. But I would also make soccer full contact. Fuck it. No more acting on the field. No more falling over and pretending you're in pain.
I'll give you a good one for football. A good one for football would be make it NBA style with an NHL style with the substitutions. Because when you substitute in football, they're off for the game. That's it. They can't come back.
Yes, I know.
And that leads to silly scenarios where, like, you know, you win and you take a player off, and then like the other team comes back. Well, you can't bring it. That's an antiquated rule, guys. Get rid of that one.
Yeah, I would say just fewer players on the field though would be very interesting.
I'm trying to think of another one. I'm thinking if there's an esport, I would change something in though. What would I change in esports though? I don't really know if there's an esport I would watch more.
Yeah, I would.
What's even on the fence for me, like Valorant or something?
I mean, here's one for Valorant. If they never released a new character again, a new agent in Valorant, I would consider watching it.
Oh,
I just don't want to be in a world where there are 50 agents in that game that I have to keep learning. Like, fuck it, man. I'm tired of that in League.
I might even say this, because I think the maps in Valorant are shit, but the agents are OP. I'd rather you ban the agents than the maps. Ooh, you like that one, do you? Good.
Yeah.
Whatever. Just talking to myself on this one. That's a good
one.
Has
NA already outperformed their 2022 Worlds run with the 1-game win over LPL? I mean, last year's Worlds teams were really shit for NA, even by NA standards.
Oh, they're some of the worst ever.
Probably.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a really bad Worlds for NA. Recently, LS mentioned in his stream how he feels that some NA pros like Tenacity should try to learn Korean or Chinese in order to try and compete in the LCK or LPL.
Is that a real take? Like, is that a real take? Because if you don't know, the reason why that's mental is Korean and Chinese, like Chinese especially, you don't know this, guys. You know when you hear stories like, oh, Nagori got like sort of a bit fluent when he went there. If you actually ask the real Chinese people who speak English, they tell you will never even be like a 6-year-old child if you don't put in like 10 years or something mental, like all day long learning. Like Korean is quite hard, but at least it has the alphabet you could figure out. Like if people don't know, in Chinese, there are like 4 tones. So the same word said in the wrong tone is a different word. That that is one of the, listen, I like him, so I won't say that. It's one of the maddest fucking LS takes of all time. But it's so on brand. It's so on brand.
It's so on brand. And also LS will be like, well, I just randomly moved to Korea when I was dirt poor. Like, I mean, he's adventurous, right? Not everybody else is that adventurous.
Exactly.
Now, also, while we do see players trying to learn Korean, like they learn second languages while they're playing, like especially Korean players that go to China. Now there are words in Chinese and Korea that have a lot of crossover, so it's not as hard for Koreans to learn Chinese.
So Korean work ethic, let's throw that in there. I don't think Tenacity is going to be like, oh boy, 6 hours of learning chat. This is brilliant. He's just going to be fucking chilling.
You know, obviously there are Korean players who have taken English lessons while being in the United States, but they're also in immersion. And for most Koreans, they've already had years of English in school. So you're asking some guy from North America who has Korean and Chinese have zero crossover with English. He's never studied these languages, probably. And he has to do it in America, not in immersion. That's going to be really fucking hard,
Am I missing something? What's the fucking end goal? Even if he speaks Chinese or Korean, he's not getting picked up. What team's he playing for? The LPL or the LCK?
He says, furthermore, Ellis mentioned that someone like Tenacity would be an interesting option for LCK teams, as he is a conventionally good-looking young talent. I don't think so.
But he's not famous enough. Here's the difference, right? If he just said that, Monty, about someone like, who could we even go with? Like the obvious ones are like double lifting and stuff. You might try double lift because you've got like the star angle. It is like an import. No Koreans are going to be hyped because you imported tenacity, surely. That doesn't even feel like that angle works. I think that's a dodge. That one never even took off, guys. That one didn't even work. That didn't land. Didn't take off. Never mind land.
I just think it's so unrealistic. And also, like, he's going to get paid more. Like, if he goes on a bottom team in LCK, he's going to get paid way less than he would get paid in North
Here's what I
America.
don't get, by the way. Surely the real LS take, and it's so mad, it also would be an LS take, but at least this one has a logic to it, Monty. Here's the real take for you. He should tell the LPL players like Knight to learn Korean and move to Korea. Now, there's a fucking banger. Imagine if, like, Knight and 369, you know, if these players move to Korea, now we're cooking with gas. Xiaohu, who gives a fuck about tenacity? Come on, bro. Because the problem with LS is if he likes a person, he always, Selfie's the only example, he always just goes way too far.
He does like the ultimate mental gymnastics. Like, you know, it's like, why is he keep pumping out fudge, man? Like, okay, like, I guess.
It's like Dom with fucking Broken Blade. It's like, I get it that you like him, just let it go. He's not who you think he is, bro. He isn't who you think he is.
What percentage of the way is Blaber to being the NA GOAT? Is he already the GOAT jungler? Yes, he's already the GOAT jungler, I think. The only real competition would be Xmithy for native North American talent. Yeah, Meteos as well, but I think Blaber is the best. I think Blaber is the best now. And what percentage of the way is he towards the NA GOAT? I mean, he could get there in another 2 or 3 years, probably, over double lift. He could get there. He's one of the key pieces of North American talent.
The problem is double lift's longevity is really incredible. It's like, I know part of it is cause the guy admits he just fucking took splits off. Like, look, in a way that's whack. It's also incredibly on brand for Americans. But, you know, whatever. It is whatever, innit? You know, like, it's just, remember, double lift did have a long time. He was good, guys.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be
you got to keep going at this point. Yeah, you got to keep going. And you got to, I'll be real. I want to see some more international results too. Give me some more, give me some runs.
Double lift is also still a middle of the pack ADC. He's not bad. So
if he really wanted to, I bet he could be good again, mate. He could be good. Yeah. He could be on the world's team again. Of course. He almost was now. Sure. You know.
Nothing will age the way the deaf video that Thorin made during last year's Worlds. That being said, how well has the Golden Guardians "fuck you" video aged in your opinion? Great. I think that's a really good video. I think it's a great video. Really good content from them, honestly. And
that's like well. They basically did what EG thought they've been doing, but didn't work. They actually did it and it worked.
It should have been EG, right? It should have been EG.
Yeah.
I hope they do more of that kind of content. I hope that becomes more of a core part of their brand.
I actually find Golden Guardians, now they've had some good players since the FBI lineup, and now this one, they're actually a very easy team to enjoy. They're just like a cool
I think Inero is a great character for League of Legends. Inero is very, very entertaining.
The joke is he's the NA talent you all missed was developing and got really good. You don't support him, you fucks, because he's on TSM.
All right, that was the last question. So thanks, guys, for watching. Again, our schedule has changed a little bit due to MSI, so we will be back recording these on Monday. They are not live on Twitch. We'll be back a week from today on the 15th. See you then.